Hey, everybody. How's it going? Can you hear me? Welcome to Dr. Fromm's live stream AP review, AP music theory review night before the test. Are you ready for the exam tomorrow? You are all going to get 5s. I'm going to help you get there. Someone asked if counterpoint is needed for the test, and the only counterpoint you need to know is for FRQ 7, which is where you write the bass line to a melody. And if you've watched my FRQ 7 video, I show you exactly how to do that. I'm going to do a live FRQ 7 today. And other than that, the rules that you have to learn for part writing are part of the counterpoint rules. So no parallel fifths, parallel octaves, similar fifths, all those things. Those are all a part of counterpoint. But if your teacher did teach you first species, second species, all the species of counterpoint, there's no questions like that exactly. You use that knowledge to do FRQ 7. So hopefully that answers that question. If anybody has any questions in general, put them in the chat and I'll try to answer them as we're going through this. What we're going to do today is I'll go through each of the FRQs, what to expect and how to approach them. And then we're going to do an FRQ 5, 6, and 7, which is the part writing and the harmonization. And if you have any questions about any of the FRQs or the multiple choice questions, put them in the comments and I'll try to get through as much as I can. And if you haven't already, I have a bunch of shorts on YouTube that you can watch that are multiple choice questions exactly the way that they'll be on the AP exam. So you can practice doing those before tomorrow. So any questions before we started? Let me take a look at the chat here. The Barron's practice tests are pretty similar to the exam as far as I know. Lucas the bassoonist, I'm also a bassoonist. And yes, for the FRQ 7, you're going to mostly use quarter notes. You're going to harmonize every quarter beat and try to put in a few passing tones, but you don't need to do any more complicated rhythm than that. I don't have any videos with specific tips for FRQs 1 through 4, but I'm going to go through my tips today. And there's certain things you need to worry about and certain things you don't need to worry about on the harmonic and the melodic dictation. So we'll get to that. And direct fifths, I will talk about those. There seems to be a lot of confusion about direct fifths. So remind me if I don't get to it to talk specifically about direct fifths or hidden fifths. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is we're going to take a look at, hold on, I'm going to share something here. Here we go. Okay, so that's not what I want to look at. This is what I want to look at. Okay, FRQs 1 and 2. This is the melodic dictation. So like I said, we're going to talk through the FRQs first, and then we'll get to some other general questions. And you don't need to know modal borrowing for the AP test. Okay, so FRQs 1 and 2, the melodic dictation. These are the first FRQs that you will do. You will, you'll go along with the recording that is played, and they'll say question number 1. Here's the first melodic dictation. And so let me go through what's on this document. So FRQ 1 is only played 3 times. It's always easier and it's diatonic. So there's no notes outside of the key signature. FRQ 2 is going to be played 4 times and it will have 1 note that is outside of the key signature. And I'll talk about which ones in a minute. And for these 2 questions, one of them will be in major and one of them will be in minor. One of them will be in 4/4, one will be in 6/8, one will be on treble clef, and one will be on bass clef. It can be any combination of any of those things. Most people tend to think that major is easier and 4/4 is easier. Treble and bass clef, it just depends on which instrument you play. But that means FRQ 1 is always going to be easier because they only play it 3 times. So it's more likely to be in 4/4 and in a major key. But like I said, they can mix them up any way they want. But here's the thing. Melodic dictation and the sight singing, they all start on scale degree 1 and end on scale degree 1. And they usually span about an octave. It's usually from do up to do, but sometimes do is in the middle and it'll go up to sol and down to sol. But it'll always span about an octave, maybe an octave plus another note. And it's mostly stepwise. So if you are listening and writing a bunch of jumps, that's probably not right. It's mostly stepwise with just a few jumps here and there. Rhythms, nothing crazy, only halves, quarters, dotted quarters, eighths, dotted eighths, and sixteenths. No rests, no ties, no tuplets, no syncopation, no fermatas, no tempo changes. Actually, no fermatas is funny. Sometimes the recording, these are played by real musicians. And I remember I was doing a practice exam once, and my students thought that the last note was held out for 3 beats just because the player sort of put a fermata on the final note. But just keep that in mind. There are no actual fermatas. And that's the other thing. That's my big tip for the melodic dictation is that the last note is always going to last half of a bar. So if we're in 4/4, the last note will be a half note. If we're in 6/8, the last note will be a dotted quarter. It's always that way. If you try to write a melody that ends on like 2 quarters at the end of the bar, it'll feel like it needs to keep going. Like there needs to be sort of a natural end to a melody. And we do that by putting a longer note value. So you can get 2 points automatically by just ending your melodic dictations on scale degree 1 with half a bar of whatever the time signature is. The only thing about that is most of the time the note scale degree 1 is in the same octave that it started on. So if it started on G, it's going to end on G in the same octave. It could go up an octave to the higher G or down an octave to the lower G. Those are both possible. But these things are always true about every melodic dictation. So you can just, boom, put that scale degree 1, half a bar, and it'll work. Okay, let me take a look at the chat real quick just to see what we're going on. Yeah, so the 2 points, extra pointers. Yeah, so we'll talk through the dictation more. Okay. Okay, so let's just go through the few other things that we got here. Like I said, 1 is in major, 1 is in minor. You're always going to follow the melodic minor scale because this is a melody. So if the melody is going up to do, you're going to raise scale degrees 6 and 7. If it's coming down from do, you're going to lower them. And most of the time, that's going to be a full descent all the way to scale degree 5. So let me know if you guys can hear this. Okay, so if we're in C minor, if we go, okay, 1, 7, 6, 5, going all the way down to 5, both of those notes will be lowered. If we're going up to do from 5, 6 to 7 to 1, those will also both be raised. Okay, and what else here? Okay, and then the chromatic pitch. So for FRQ2, the chromatic pitches that are possible are the same ones that come from the applied chords, the secondary dominant chords that you have learned, which means if we're in a major key, if we're in C major, okay, we could have a sharp scale degree 4. We could have a sharp scale degree 5. We could have a sharp scale degree 1. And technically, you could have a flat 7 that comes down to 6. I don't think I've actually seen that one on any of the exams that they've released, but technically it could be possible. That's if it's in a major key. If it's in a minor key, that chromatic note will be only scale degree sharp 4, or possibly if we're in C minor, you could have a raised 3 as it goes up to 4 as an applied chord to 4. But again, I don't think I've seen that one on a test. The most common one is sharp 4. Most of the applied chords, the secondary, the chromatic pitches, and the chromatic note on FRQ 7 are all going to be raised scale degree 4, harmonizing an applied chord to 5. And get to that later. Okay, so let's talk about melodic dictation. The way that I do it is I listen for the contour of the melody. And like I said, specifically, these melodies span about an octave. And if you've done any practice exams, practice melodic dictation, what they tend to do is they tend to start on Do and then sort of get up to scale degree 5 and then either leap up or continue up to Do and then come back down somehow. So there's usually starting on Do and then sort of like a midway pause almost on scale degree 5, going up to Do and then coming all the way back down. So actually, let's take a look. So I have the released exam from 2016, and this is the FRQ 1. This is the first melodic dictation. Okay, this does something different. So this one starts on Do. This is one that goes down to Sol. So Do is in the middle of the range here. Sorry, I can't look at my screen and play this at the same time. Anyway, it goes up to scale degree 5. It gets to scale degree 5 in the middle of the third bar and then comes back down. So this one is mostly stepwise. And again, it ends with a dotted quarter note on Do in the same octave, just like I said, it probably would. And this one's in 6/8. So this is one of the easier ones that is in 6/8. And look at the rhythm. It's all eighth notes, except for the last note's a dotted quarter. There's a couple quarter notes at the beginning. And this right here, this dotted quarter 16th eighth, this is the most common way to change the subdivision of 6/8. So rather than 1, 2, 3, dot, dot, da, we have 1, 2, 3, da, 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 da. That's the most common 6/8 rhythm that you're going to see. Some of the more complicated 6/8 rhythms, we might have more 16th notes. They tend to not give you a whole bunch of complicated 16 note rhythms on this, but yeah, there's this is the simpler one. This is the 6/8. Okay, any questions about this? Okay, I'm going to go down to FRQ 2 now. Okay, so this harder one, and bass clef. Okay, so that one starts on Do, goes up to 5, comes back down to Do, and then arpeggio up to 6, and then right there, that's our raised scale degree 4. Okay, this one has a hard jump too. A leap of a 6th down to Do. Oh, that's the other thing I wanted to talk about. So leaps on the melodic dictation and the sight singing are usually to and from scale degrees 1 and 5. So look at this. The first jump in this one, that's from Do up to Sol. It's from scale degree 1 up to 5. And then small jump of a third. And then this arpeggio outlining the triad, C minor triad, E flat, G, C, and then comes back down the melodic minor scale. I'm sorry. Yeah, it comes down the melodic minor scale. by step. This is all by step. And then, okay, we're on scale degree 5. We leap to the leading tone, which is a big leap of a sixth, but then it steps back to do. So all of our jumps are going to be to or from scale degrees 1 and 5. And a lot of the time we'll see jumps like this where, it's almost like the ending was supposed to be 5-1, but they like overshot it by a note and then fixed it. Okay. And that's how I like to think of the sight singing too. It's kind of hard to sing that 5, 7, 1. It's kind of hard to hit that note. If you can hear the do of da ba, you can be like bum ba da da, and just overshoot it by a half step and then go back to it, if that makes any sense. Okay, melodic dictation. Any other questions specifically about melodic dictation? Alternate scoring guide. Yeah. Okay. So the scoring guide for melodic dictation. It's very strange. So what they do is they grade every half a bar, whether it has to be completely correct to get a point. So if you get the first 3 notes correct, you get 1 point. If you get the entire first bar correct, you get 2 points. And the way that they do this is if you get any half bar at all correct in both pitch and rhythm, that's also a bonus point. So that's where the 9th point comes from. And the reason that they do that is if you don't have any half bars that are completely correct in both rhythm and pitch, then they either only grade the pitch or only grade the rhythm. So if you are someone who is horrible at pitch and awesome at rhythm, technically you could just write only the rhythms and get 2 points. If you are horrible at rhythms and excellent at pitch, for those people who have perfect pitch, you could write all of the pitches and get none of the rhythms correct and get 4 points. But no matter what you do, if you get any half bar correct in both pitch and rhythm, you're going to get more than if you had just done only pitch or only rhythm. And that's where the tip about using writing scale degree 1 as your final note, that's half a bar, is going to automatically get you 1 half bar that is correct. So that's why it's going to get you 2 points and not 1. And the other reason when I do this, I think the best way to do this is to literally write scale degree 1 half a bar before it even starts. Because first of all, it's like 90% likely it's going to be that note in that octave. If it's not that note in that octave, it's going to be an octave higher or an octave lower, and you will know that upon the first listening. And when you have that final note as an anchor, you know that that is the destination. You're not going to get as lost as when it's just a wide open, empty staff with nothing on it. If you know that there's a do there, at least when you hear the last note, you can probably remember the note that came before it and whether it was the leading tone that stepped to it or it was scale degree 2 that stepped down to 1. So that's my advice. Write scale degree 1 as half a bar before the question even begins. Why is my head so shiny? I did shave my head today and there's a light above my head. You don't have to bring headphones. Your teacher, whoever's proctoring your exam, should be playing the entire recording in the room for everybody at once. It's not like an individual test. Okay, filling in the blanks. Yeah, we'll talk about FRQ 7 in a little bit. Rhythm, contour, overwhelmed. I think contour is important. And if you know, like I said, that it's basically going to span an octave, like look at this one that's on the screen. It starts on C and the highest note is C. And yeah, there's that dip down to the leading tone as the very first note after the initial note. But if you know that you're staying within that octave, it's a lot easier to write the contour, because if you get off, if you start writing jumps where there's not jumps, or your jumps are too big or something, you'll see that you're starting to write way more than an octave. And if you know that, the general shape of the line, and you know that it's only going to hit do, that's going to force the notes to conform to a certain pattern that that should make musical sense. That if you have the general contour, but you're not aiming to, to hit do in the middle there, it's going to be more likely to be incorrect. Does that make sense? Okay. Anything else about melodic dictation? There are no Neapolitan chords or augmented sixth chords, by the way, or Locrian. Locrian's not going to come up on this. Okay, so that is melodic dictation. Let's go on to harmonic dictation. And what am I looking at here? Okay, well, let's go to this page. Yeah, I'm gonna make this PDF available. I meant to do it and haven't done it. So when this is over, this PDF that I'm going through, I will put it on my Gumroad store for free that you can download. So remind me to do that if I don't mention it again. Okay, harmonic dictation. So this is, I don't know. When I've looked at previous exams and how students have done, it seems like this can be the hardest question. So let's talk about how we should approach this. So FRQ3 and FRQ4 are the same length, and they play both of them 4 times. FRQ3 only has diatonic chords. FRQ4 will have 1 chord that's outside of the key, so like a 5 of 5 or 5 of 2. They're sort of equally difficult, though, unlike the melodic dictation questions. Again, one will be in a major key, one will be in a minor key. They always start on a root position 1 chord. Here's the important thing. They all end with standard cadences, and there's a very small selection of cadences they use. They only use perfect authentic cadences, imperfect authentic cadences, a half cadence on 5, a deceptive cadence going from 5 to 6, and that's it. A Phrygian half cadence, which is a type of half cadence. There's not going to be a plagal cadence on the harmonic dictation, and there's no other chords. So that means your final chord has to be a 1 chord, a root position 5, or a root position 6. Technically, I think the 1 chord could be a 1-6, but I think every exam I've ever seen, it's always a root position 1 chord. So when I'm doing harmonic dictation, I try to follow either the soprano or the bass. I've gotten pretty good at doing the soprano and the bass at the same time, but you don't need to be able to do that. Just write as many soprano notes or as many bass notes first as you can, and immediately in the first listening, figure out what the final chord is. And there's only 3 choices: 1, 5, and 6. If it ends on 1, it should feel stable, like you've reached the end of a piece. If it ends on 5, it should feel like there's something waiting and there's something missing, right? If it ends on 6, deceptive cadence, I think that's the most obvious one, right? We hear the 5 chord and then it goes to the unexpected 6 chord. That's the most important thing, because just like the melodic dictation, if you know what the final chord is for the harmonic dictation, right after that first listening, when you hear it the second time, you're going to be less likely to freak out, because you can at least aim to hear the second to last chord into the last chord. And it's not just this endless sea of sound that you have gotten completely confused by, right? So do the cadences first. And I know that some of you are better at the soprano, hearing the soprano, and some of you are better at hearing the bass. The thing is, those are worth equal amounts of points, right? The way that the harmonic dictation is graded, there are 9 chords. They give you the first chord. So you have to write 8 soprano notes, 8 bass notes, and 8 Roman numerals. So if you're better at writing the soprano, I would probably do that first so that you can spend more time on the bass later. If you're better at hearing the bass, do the bass first. Then do the Roman numerals. And I don't know if you've really internalized the types of part writing, phrases, harmonic dictation that they give you. There's only so many choices, right? Scale degree 1, if scale degree 1 is in the bass, it's probably a 1 chord, unless we're having an entire pedal 6/4. If we go 1, 4, 6, 4, 1, and if we have a 2/4/2 chord, there's the basses in scale degree 1 again, and then that chord goes to 5, 6, 5, and back to 1. That's a pattern. That's a common pattern that is used. If you know these patterns, it makes all of this easier. That's why I did the chord by chord series, where I look at all of these common patterns that really have 1 or 2 easy solutions. But anyway, listen to the bass line, try to get the bass notes right, and then there's only so many combinations of chords that are possible between the soprano and the bass note that you wrote. Scale degree 3 is always going to be a 1/6 chord. It'll never be a 3 chord. There are no 3 chords on the test. There's no 3 chords on the test. If you did the College Board practice modules, there's several questions that have 3 chords on them, and I don't know why they did that. They don't put the 3 chord on the test. Okay, and then some people get a little concerned about the different options for what Roman numeral it could be. So the thing is, if you write a 5 chord and it's a 5/7, you get half a point. If it's a actually the hardest combination, by the way, if you have a bass on scale degree 2 and a soprano on scale degree 4, that can be a whole bunch of different chords. It could be a root position 2 chord, it could be a 7/6 chord, and it could be a not that. A 5/6/4, and it could be a 5/4/3. Okay, so if you have the bass on scale degree 2, there's lots of options. Just pick the one that you think. Don't spend a ton of time on it. It's only one of the 24 points for that entire question. Just do your best, and don't get wrapped up in those little things. Another common one is like scale degree 6 could be a 6 chord. I'm sorry, if scale degree 6 is in the bass, you could have a 6 chord or a 4/6 chord or a 2/4/3. And you can try to listen through for which quality it is. But again, don't spend a ton of time. It's not that big of a deal. Harmonic dictation. Yeah. So again, these are melodies, right, that are harmonized. So let's take a look at 2016's released exam. So here is the first harmonic dictation question, and look at the soprano line. Okay, it is all stepwise, except one jump of a third. Okay, and then the bass has a 1 to 5 leap, and then down to 3, and then it's all stepwise, leap of a third, stepwise, 5/1. Okay, so how many jumps are there in the soprano? There's 1 jump of a third. In the bass, we have 1, 2, 3. We have 4 jumps, but the first one is from 1 to 5, and the last one is from 5 to 1, which I think are a little bit easier to understand because they're common pillars that we should be able to recognize, right? So try to remember that these are melodies. They're not going to jump all over the place. They're not going to use weird combinations of scale degrees that don't make sense. They're going to end on familiar patterns, cadential patterns that we already know. This one right here ends with a 5-1. The soprano ends on scale degree 3. So this is an imperfect authentic cadence. And yeah, so anyway, so the way that I would do this is I would listen for the soprano, try to get as many soprano notes as right. I can see that we start on scale degree 1, and hopefully on the first listening, I have recognized that I ended on a 1 chord. And hopefully I realized that the soprano ended on scale degree 3, which is the same scale degree we started on. So look at that. The range of the soprano is only 4 notes. There's only G's, A's, B's, and C sharps, right? So it's just going to stay in that little range. And then the bass is going to have a little bit bigger of a range because it's jumping more. But just try to get as many of those notes as possible. Then once you get to like the 4th listening, fill in any gaps. If you left a hole anywhere, you won't get points for it. If you guess a note that is like stepwise connected to the notes around it, it's very likely to be correct, right? So don't leave anything blank and make educated guesses. Remember that, these are going to follow patterns. Like right here, we have a 5 going to a 6, a deceptive motion. That's a common pattern. The 2-6 to 5, that is a standard way of going to a 5 chord, 2-6 to 5. And specifically 1-6 to 2-6 to 5. That is a super common pattern when you have 1, 2, 5, and the bass goes 3, 4, 5. Okay, so try to remember that these are melodies. They're not going to do weird things. And make educated guesses and don't get too caught up in the details, specifically about like which Roman numeral to choose. So let's look at question 4 now, and we'll talk a little bit more about applied chords because this is the first applied chord that you'll have to deal with in the FRQs. So here's FRQ 4. It's an E minor, and we have a 5-4-2 of 4. So let me talk about hold on. So first of all, this is in a minor key, right? This is in a minor key. Every scale degree 7 will be raised. And we have this 5-6-5 right here. Okay, so let's talk about the 5-4-2 of 4. Okay, so in a minor key, the only applied chords are going to be applied chords to 5 and applied chords to 4. And in a minor key, when we have an applied chord to 4, we're going to use the lowered scale degree 7 as the 7th of that chord. So if we're in E minor, right, the 4 chord is A minor. The 5-7 chord in the key of A minor, right, would be E7, which has E, G sharp, B, and D. So right here, this D natural in the bass, that is the 7th of the 5-4-2 of 4. The 7th is in the bass, 4-2 position, 3rd inversion. Okay. So we also have the raised 3rd of that chord in the soprano. So let me just play the notes that they have here. Okay, so this is, if I play the whole chord, it's probably something like, and then, okay, so let's talk about this chord specifically. So the 4-2 position means the 7th is in the bass. And when the 7th is in the bass, it has to step down. and it steps down to the third of the 4 chord. That's why it's a 4-6 and not a root position 4. That'll be true of any applied chord. If it's in the 4-2 position, it's going to step down to a first inversion chord that it's going to. So if you had a 5-4-2 of 2, it's going to go to a 2-6 chord. Most of the other inversions go to a root position chord. So anyway, the way that I think about this is when we're hearing the harmonic dictation for FRQ4, one chord is an applied chord, and it's going to stick out because it has a note that's outside of the key. And I looked at a bunch of the previous exams. I think that the notes outside of the key are almost always in the soprano or the bass because they want you to be able to write that note, and it's easier to hear it if we're writing it too, and it's not just some alto or tenor note that we're not writing. So what I would do is I would hear, the first 3 chords, and then I'd hear that 4th chord and be like, okay, something's happening. I know that it's going somewhere. And if I can tell what chord it's going to, then I know it's, if I know that I'm going to a 4-6 chord, then I know it's an applied chord to 4. But let's think through that. So if I have a 1 chord and then 5-6-5 and then 1, and then mystery chord, and then this chord. Okay, so hopefully if I'm following the bass, at least I know that I end up on scale degree 6 if I've gotten the bass notes right. So if I have some mystery chord here that I know is an applied chord, and then I'm going to a chord with scale degree 6 in the bass, that scale degree 6 is either going to be a 4-6 chord or a 6 chord. If it were a 6 chord, that would be a major chord in minor, right? Which I think sticks out more than in major keys. So mystery chord, and then if I had a 6 chord, it's going to sound like, it's going to have that deceptive feeling like we've arrived on a major chord, right? It wasn't that. It kind of just blended into the texture. So I would think that that's a 4-6 chord and not a root position 6 chord. Because I think that some of you might think, oh, that's scale degree 6. This must be an applied chord to 6. And that could be true if we were in a major key, maybe. But in a minor key, they're never going to give you an applied chord to 6. Okay. All right. Anything else about harmonic dictation? Does that help you with thinking about the applied chords? It's only one chord in the harmonic dictation, and it should stick out to you. If you don't get it right, you're only going to lose 1 point if you get the chord wrong, and 2 or 3 points if you don't get the right soprano or bass notes. Like I said, I think the chromatic note is always going to be in the soprano or the bass. It's technically possible that it wouldn't be, but I think it usually is because they want you to be able to write that. Also, take a look at the soprano and the bass for these 3 chords, right? Soprano, that G sharp is connecting those 2 pitches chromatically, and the bass, it's connecting those 3 notes by step. Applied chords almost always connect everything by step. There might be like one jump in one of the voices, but since we're writing melodic outer voices, usually we're going to see that, like 2 of the voices going in opposite directions by step. So hopefully that will, help you think about applied chords. Maybe make them a little bit less scary. I'm not sure. Okay, let me take a look at what's going on in the chat here. So accidentals, alt to the third. Okay, we'll talk about figured bass next because that's FRQ 5. How many points is possible? Harmonic dictation, the most important thing I think is to listen for the cadence the very first time. You should know if that last chord is a 1 or a 5 or a 6. It'll make everything easier. And applied chords in minor are only going to be applied chords to 5 and applied chords to 4. In a major key, they're going to be applied chords to 2, 6, 5, and 4. And I'll talk about those more when we get to FRQ 6. Oh, for the subscores, yeah, don't worry too much about the subscores. It's kind of impossible to predict. Usually, the subscores, average out, but they could round up or down. Like if you get a 5 on one and a 4 on the other, you could end up with a 5 or a 4. And it's just, they're all weighted differently, and it depends on which questions you get right. I can't really predict that. There is only one applied chord on the harmonic dictation FRQ4. There's only one applied chord on FRQ6, and you only need to use one applied chord on FRQ7. And I'll talk about that when we get there. There are no minor 5 chords on the AP test. They do not use minor 5. They don't use the subtonic chord with an unraised scale degree 7. Every leading tone will be raised with the one exception of 5, 4, 2 of 4 in a minor key. Every other leading tone will be raised. Oh, I'm sorry. 5. An applied chord to 4 always has a lowered scale degree 7, but every other scale degree 7 will be raised in every other chord. There will be Picardy thirds, and I think I put one in the FRQ 5 that we're gonna take a look at. You won't have to dictate giant steps. Will the one chord have the root in the bass as well? I mean, we can have every inversion of one chord, but the first one chord that they give you is always in root position, and a one chord at a cadence will also always be in root position. Yeah, for harmonic dictations, so personally, I would do the bass first because that's going to make you more likely to get the Roman numerals right. So I would listen to the bass line. Like if I had to only listen to one thing for each of the 4 listens, I would do the bass line first. On the second listening, do the bass line again and make sure it's correct. Third listening, do the soprano. Fourth listening, make sure the soprano is correct. And in any downtime, fill in as many Roman numerals as possible. Okay. Yes, we are going to do practice problems. So let's get to that. Yeah, let's get to that now. How do you know if it's diminished? Okay. Soprano. One, 4, 2. Yeah, so the only way that you get half points on harmonic dictation is if you get the right Roman numeral but put the wrong inversion. If you have the right inversion number but the wrong Roman numeral, you don't get any points. So that's really if you like write a 5 and it's a 5, 7, or if you write a 5, 6, 5 and it's a 5, 4, 3 or something. Oh yeah, and yes, you only have to write the bass and the soprano. You do not write the alto and tenor. Let me see if I can find. What am I looking at? Yeah, here. Okay, yeah. So look, here's the directions right here. Whoops. Notate only the soprano or bass. Do not notate alto and tenor. So you don't get any extra points if you try to do that. Do not write the alto or tenor. And yes, for harmonic dictation and melodic dictation, you get 30 seconds in between the first listening and the second listening, and then 1 minute between all the other listenings. Okay, so let's go on to FRQ 5, and this is figured bass, and I know this can confuse a lot of people. Okay, so we're going to do one of these together. We'll do 5, 6, and 7. Okay, FRQ 5 is always figured bass, which means you have to write the Roman numerals and then write the 3 upper voices. FRQ 6, they give you the Roman numerals. You have to write all 4 voices. One of these will be in a major key and one of these will be in a minor key. Most of the time, FRQ 5 is in a minor key because they want to make sure you understand how to deal with the sharp symbols and the other symbols that mean to raise the leading tone. That doesn't mean every exam has this question in a minor key, but more than half of the released exams, I think like 80% of the released exams, this first question is in a minor key and the second question is in a major key. And again, these are all going to end with these specific cadences, no plagal cadences on this one. It always starts with a root position 1 chord, and then FRQ 6 is going to have 1 applied chord. Okay, so let's see. Yeah, okay, so my tips here are that whichever one's in a minor key, you have to raise every leading tone, and you can't double the leading tone, which means every chord that is a 5 chord or a 7 chord, you have to write exactly 1 accidental up top. If you wrote more than 1 accidental, if it's wrong. If you didn't write any accidentals, it's wrong, right? There's a 1-to-1 correspondence between the number of chords that contain the leading tone and the number of leading tones you have to write. Okay, what else? Yeah, and then for part writing, one of the most common mistakes is that students accidentally copy the bass line into like the alto voice or the tenor voice, especially if the bass line is melodic, because we're trying to write melodies, right? And you stumble upon a scale degree that the bass is already on, and you're like, hey, look at this nice stepwise line, but the bass already did that stepwise line, and now you have parallel octaves. So we'll avoid that. Okay, so let's get into it. So let me I'm going to share my MuseScore screen here. So give me a second. And let me know if the sound on MuseScore is working, if it's too loud. Okay, so here we go. We are in. Do this first one up here. We're in the key of D minor. Okay, can you hear that when I play it? Is it loud? Is it soft? This D. Okay, we're in D minor. Okay, can you guys tell me what Roman numeral? One sec. Okay, what Roman numeral? Okay, we're in D minor. So tell me, what Roman numeral do we have first? Great, 1. Okay, second, we have an E with a 6 under it, a 6 with a slash through it. What's this second one? This is one of my favorite chords. It's not a 2 chord. It's scale degree 2 with a 6 under it. Okay, so yes, it's a 7 diminished chord. Okay, so what you do is you go to scale degree 2, and when there's a 6, it means that this is the third of this chord. So the third of, if this is the third, the root is a third below it, which is C, which is scale degree 7. And this means we're going to raise, this slash means we're going to raise the leading tone wherever it is. And in D minor, the leading tone is C sharp. So whoever's on a C in this chord is going to get a C sharp. Okay, third chord, we have an F with a 6 under it. What do we have next? I'll get to the slash in a minute. We'll go back and do this. 1 6, good. Okay, 1 6 is a super common chord. Next chord, we have scale degree 4, G with a 6 5 under it. All right, yes, we have a 2 6 5. So I get on to rewrite these. Okay. Imagine that there's lines connecting these at input lines. 8-7, dash 5 4 dash sharp. What does all this mean? This scares people. Yeah. All right, exactly. We have a 164 going to a 57. That's what those chords. Why are there so many numbers? I know. This is what scares people. This is just a 164 going to a 57. The reason they write all these extra numbers is because they're actually telling you exactly how those voices are connected. So we'll talk about that when we get there. Okay, and then the final chord, 4 dash sharp. Yeah, it's a 1 chord with a suspension. Raise the 3 in the suspension. Yes, so that means this is a major 1 chord. This is a Picardy third. This is a cadential 6/4 to a 1/4/3 suspension with a Picardy third. This is how they try to trick you. This is a whole bunch of stuff all at once. So we'll get to that in a minute. Okay, so let's go through chord by chord. So we'll talk about each of these as we get here. Okay, so this first chord has a 6 with a slash through it. Every symbol that is in the figured bass that is on this test is just telling you to raise the leading tone. The slash means we're going to raise the 6. If we see like a 4 plus, it means we're going to raise the 4. If you see an accidental next to a 6, you raise the 6. If you see an accidental by itself, like we do at the end, it means the third is raised. Okay, so the note that is a 6th above E is C, and we're going to raise it to C sharp, which is the leading tone of D minor. So you should only be raising your leading tone. All of these things should just be your leading tone, right? Except for the Picardy third. I'm sorry. The Picardy third is the one thing that's different here. A Picardy third is just when the final 1 chord in a minor key is major instead of minor. Okay, so there are 2 ways to connect these first 3 chords. If you've watched my videos, I go over it in 2 of the different videos about connecting 1-to-1-6 with voice exchange or with parallel tenths. So I'm going to use voice exchange, and voice exchange means the bass goes D, E, F. So somebody else is going to go F, E, D. They're going to do the same thing backwards. So who's on F here? It's the soprano. So I'm going to go F, E, D, and that is voice exchange. Okay. And I know that is one way that I can connect these chords and it'll be correct. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to move each person as little as possible from chord to chord. So that means I need a C, and it's going to be a C sharp, and I'm just going to take that leading tone back to D. Okay, and then I'm sorry, I didn't say what chord this is. This is a 7/6 chord. This is a C sharp diminished chord. I need C sharp, E, and G. I have C sharp. I have 2 E's. So let's put a G in the alto. Okay, and now I'm going to my D minor chord over F, D minor over F. So I have F in the bass. I have 2 D's already. I need an A. And I can put A in the soprano. Not the soprano, the alto. Okay, so this is correct. These 3 chords. Okay, those are correct. Let me slow this down so that it's yeah. Okay, so yes, this is these are unequal fifths. Good catch. Okay, so this is a C sharp to a G. That's a tritone. That's a diminished fifth. And then D to A is a perfect fifth. Those are correct. You almost do not need to worry about unequal fifths. And let me talk about unequal fifths later, not right now. You almost never need to worry about them because the places they pop up, this is an exception where you're allowed to use it. And the other places they pop up are if you're breaking some other rule. So you almost don't even need to worry about them. And yes, I'll talk about direct fifths later as well. But let's get through this first. Okay. All right. So those are the first three chords. And yes, a 2-6-5. A 2-6-5 can go to a 1-6-4 because don't think of the 1-6-4. Don't think of that as an independent chord. This is really a two-part 5 chord. It's like a 5 chord with a first half and a second half. And the first half is the notes of a tonic chord. But any chord that can go to 5 can go to 1-6-4 and then 5. Okay, so in a 2-6-5, that is we're in D minor, so that's a 7th chord built on E, right? Okay, E, G, B flat, D. It's a half diminished 7th chord. So we need an E. We already have a G. We need a B flat and a D. We have two voices on D, soprano and tenor. They could both, not both. One of them can go to D. And we also need a B flat and we need an E. So I can see that I could keep the tenor on the D and move the soprano to the E. Or vice versa. Both of those work. It kind of doesn't matter. And then for the alto, they can move to the B flat. Okay, so we have this connection. Okay, and hopefully we notice here we have two voices moving up in parallel fourths. This second fourth is augmented, so it's a tritone. But if we are in a major key, it wouldn't be. It would be a perfect fourth. Perfect fourths are completely legal. They are never wrong. You can use parallel fourths anytime. And here, when we go from a 1 chord to a 2 chord, if you keep the root above the other notes, so if the soprano is on the root, that means the 5th is going to be underneath it, which will make it a 4th and not a 5th. And so it looks like there's a bunch of parallels here. Every voice is moving up, except the tenor, which is staying on the same note, but there are no bad parallels here. This is totally valid. Okay, so now we're going to this big, scary 2-part chord. Okay, so all this is a 1 chord with scale degree 5 in the bass, and then a 5-7 chord with scale degree 5 in the bass. And whoever is an octave above the bass is going to go down to a 7th of the bass. Whoever is a 6th above it is going to go down to a 5th above it. Whoever is a 4th above it is going to go down to the raised 3rd. So I need the notes D, F, and A, right? This is a D minor chord with A in the bass. I need D, F, A. So my tenor's already on D, and my alto is a half step above A, and my soprano is a half step below F. So there's my D, F, A right there. And here's the thing about this big, scary chord is if you get this first one right, which is just a 1 chord over scale degree 5, all 3 voices just move down by step. So 4 goes down to 3. What did I just say? 3 goes down to 2 is what I meant. 1 goes down to 7, and that is C sharp. So that is a leading tone. That's C sharp. And then A goes down to G. Okay, so if I play these 2 chords, that's all it is. You don't even have to think about it. It is every single time. These 3 notes going down by step in the key. Okay, so it's not scary. I mean, it is scary, but it just writes itself once you realize what it is. Okay, so the 4-3, this is a suspension. And they do put this on the test sometimes. It's not on every single exam. It might be on FRQ 5 or 6. Okay, so what that means is this is just a 1 chord, and we are going to use only scale degrees 1 and 5. And then instead of having a third, one voice is going to have a fourth and then a third. So instead of having, if we're in D minor and there's no Picardy third, it just means we would end on a D chord. So instead, we're going to have a suspension, a sus chord. So it's like a D sus, D G A, and normally that would go to D F A. But because we have the Picardy third, because it goes to a sharp, it's going to go to an F sharp instead. So the way that you do this is, what note is a fourth above D? G. That is the note that is going to step down to the third of the chord, F sharp. And in order to be a suspension, it has to come from the previous chord. So I need a G here that comes from a G in this chord. And there's a G right there. So I'm going to put the G in the alto, and it's going to step down to the F sharp. And that's just because there's this sharp here. Okay. Otherwise, you're just writing roots and fifths in this chord. And I'm probably going to use all roots because my soprano is going to step down 2 to 1. My leading tone in the tenor, C sharp, is going to go up to D. Okay. And that would be correct. Let me play this whole thing so we can hear it. Okay, so that is the correct way to do this. If your leading tone is in the alto or tenor, you can resolve it like this. And look, we have three Ds, 3 scale degree 1s. This is correct. If it's in the tenor, though, or the alto, you can put this on the 5th, and that's correct. This is called a frustrated leading tone. And all that means is, instead of the leading tone resolving, we went down to the 5th of the chord instead in order to make a complete chord. So the way that sounds is... Okay, so again, this note, this F sharp, this is what makes this a Picardy third, and that is coming from this sharp down here. If this was not a Picardy third, if this only said how do I type this? Oh my gosh. This figured bass font is really annoying. Oh, that's not it. There we go. Okay. Nope. Sorry. One sec. Let me get it. 4 dash 3. There we go. I got it. Okay. So if it just said that, okay, that's a more common suspension. And that's just ending with a regular. Okay. That's the normal suspension. We can see it in major and minor keys. If they want to be extra, then they'll put a sharp on this 3, and that means we have to raise that to F sharp. Okay, and take a look at this. Take a look at these lines. Soprano, 100% stepwise. Alto, 100% stepwise. And my tenor was 100% stepwise until I frustrated my leading tone. So let's put it back there. Okay, so most of the time we're going to have almost no leaps in the upper voices. That's what they're trying to get you to do, is to write smooth voice leading from one chord to another, avoiding parallel fifths, avoiding parallel octaves, avoiding augmented seconds. And the progressions they give you are going to usually do this. So this is maybe a little less common, where literally all 3 parts, all 3 upper voices can be a fully stepwise motion. But usually what will happen, it's like mostly stepwise, and there will be one place where you have to use a leap of a third or a fourth. Okay. Why did I frustrate my leading tone? I never frustrate my leading tones. I love resolving my leading tones, and it doesn't matter. You never have to frustrate a leading tone. The reason people do it, and if you look at any Bach chorale, he always does this in his perfect authentic cadences. He always frustrates the leading tone in the inner voice so that the final chord has a fifth. If you don't frustrate the leading tone, then you have three roots and a third, and some people prefer the sound of two roots, a third, and a fifth. But you never have to do the frustrated leading tone. Yeah, so, okay. This is the leading tone. This is a resolved leading tone. It goes up. A frustrated leading tone is when you move into some other note that is not scale degree 1, but you're only allowed to do that in the alto or the tenor voice. You are not allowed to do that in any other voice part. I'm sorry, in the outer voices, in soprano or bass. You can get a 0 on the sight singing and still get a 5 on the test, by the way. Okay, where did you get the chord for the 4? Oh, where did I get the chord for the 4? Okay, so that's actually a good question. So let me put that back. So this is what we had in the figured bass, right? 4-3, so, or 4- sharp. If you just see a 4, it means it's a root position chord with a 4-3 suspension on it. And the only chords that they put suspensions on in the test are 1 chords and 5 chords. So, and specifically at cadences. So this is a 4-3 suspension with a picardy third at the perfect authentic cadence, right? So sometimes we'll see this same motion on a half cadence with a 4-3 with the bass. Okay, and again, this is just okay, if we were just writing this, like if we saw this in the Roman numerals, all we would see is 1-6-4 and 5-7. Okay, all these extra numbers, these come from the old figured bass way of doing this, where the keyboard player would just see these numbers and then they would play these chords. And these numbers just tell you which notes above the bass go to which other notes. Okay. And the good news is, most of the time when they do this on the test, they actually show you both versions. I think the figured bass is the one place they tend to use this one, but okay, isn't the 4th chord supposed to be 2 with a slash? Yeah, yes, that's true. Okay, so sorry. Yes, this 2 chord should have this. Let me put it in the right place. That symbol. But you don't have to write that on the test. They do not take off points for incorrect capitalization or using the diminished symbols correctly. And all you have to do is put the Roman numeral here. And the reason for that is there's actually different ways that this is taught. I believe, especially in Europe, they tend to only use all capital Roman numerals, and they don't use lowercase for major and uppercase for minor, uppercase for major. They just use uppercase. Okay, good. All right. Okay, why is it half diminished? We're in a minor key, and the 2 chord is half diminished in minor. That's my D minor chord. That's my half diminished 2 chord. But again, the quality, they don't grade the quality of the chord for this. They only grade the correct Roman numeral. Okay, so that was FRQ 5. Oh, by the way, you don't need to have the correct rhythm really for this one or for the harmonic dictation. They only grade the pitches. Only if you do something weird with stems. As long as it's clear that you have like these notes, this is the one place where the rhythms don't line up is when you have a suspension, right? So as long as it's clear The rhythms don't really matter. They're not grading you on rhythm for this question. If you have any questions about dictation, I did that already in this live stream. So when we're done, you can go back and watch the beginning. Okay. Oh, hold on. All right. So we're going to go on. There we go. Okay. We're going to go on and do an FRQ 6 because this is the one with the applied chords. And actually, let's do this one first. Okay. So we're in the key of E flat major, and we have a 5, 6, 5 of 2. So what we're going to do is ignore that chord for a second and do all of the other chords, because we want to make sure that we have the chord that it's going to. That's going to make it easier to figure out what that chord is. So we're in E flat. Okay, a 2 chord is in E flat. Sorry. In the bass, I'm putting the bass notes in, right? So the bass note for a 2 chord is F. There we go. Okay, a 5, 6, 5 chord in E flat major. The 5 chord is B flat, and 5, 6, 5 means first inversion of a 7th chord. So that's going to be D in the bass. Sorry, I have these hidden. There we go. Okay. And then back to scale degree 1. Okay. And then 2, 6. That means a 2 chord in first inversion. Okay. So the 2, 6, what do we get? All right. A flat. Good. Scale degree 4. And then ends on a 5. So what kind of cadence is this that ends on 5? Half cadence. Good. Okay, so the reason that I left that applied chord blank is because it should connect logically from this chord to this chord. So if I know what this chord it's going to is, it's going to make me make a more logical choice about what this note is, because the bass isn't going to randomly jump from some weird note to some other weird note. So, okay, the way that we do applied chords is we pretend like we're in this key for 1 minute. So F minor, because this is a 2 chord. This is a minor 2 chord. In the key of F minor, I want to make a 5, 6, 5 chord. So if I were in the key of F minor, the 5, 7 chord of F minor is C7, which is C, E natural, G, B flat. And 6, 5 means the third of that chord is in the bass, which is the E natural. Yes. Okay, so that's the chord that goes in the bass. E natural. That's the note that goes in the bass. And look at this. It connects logically from one bass note to the other. Okay, it is a chromatic half step. It's scale degree 1, sharp 1, 2. 1, raised 1, 2. Okay, so that's what I want you to remember, is that the applied chords should connect logically to the ones they go to. And this is a very common one for this 2 chord, this 5, 6, 5 of 2. Okay, and all right, so this is a C7, right? We already have E in the bass, so I need C and G and a B flat. So what I'm going to do is move all the voices as little as possible. Look at this. There's already a B flat here, and there's already a G here. Whoops, I didn't mean to do that. There we go. Okay, so I already have a B flat, already have a G, and an E in the bass. I need a C, and I can put C in the tenor. It's only a leap of a third, which is fine. Okay, this now, remember, this is a dominant chord, and the leading tone has to resolve, and the chordal 7th has to resolve. The E to F is the leading tone. It's in the bass. So we just have to connect the chordal 7th to the right place. All 7ths go down. So that B flat is going to go down to A flat. Okay, and we need this to be an F minor chord. So we need a C and then probably another F if we can. And look, we already have a C. And I can easily bring my alto down to F. And there we go. Hey, that makes sense. Okay, so now we're going from 2 to 5, 6, 5. This is a B flat 7 over D. So I already have my D. I need B flat, F, and A flat. Hey, look at that. We already have an A flat and we already have an F. And we need a B flat. And look, the tenor is right there. Okay, so the B flat, D, F, A flat. That's our 5, 6, 5 chord. This is a 7th chord. The 7th is right here, the A flat and the soprano. It's going to go down. Okay, so we're going to go down to a E flat major chord. I can put my B flat in my tenor, and I can put E flat in my alto. Okay, let's just listen to these 5 chords. Okay, 2 more chords. Okay. Now, 2-6 chord. If you haven't, and if this chord confuses you, I did a video specifically about the 2-6 chord, and it's very helpful. And the 2-6 chord normally doubles scale degree 4, which is the third of the 2 chord. And that sounds strange, but this is how it almost always happens in real music. So what we're going to do is we're going to double scale degree 4. And look at that. The soprano is right there. And this is an F minor chord, remember? So we're just going to go up to there. And then B flat's going to go up to C. Okay, so look at this. We have all 3 upper voices moving in contrary motion to the bass. And B flat to E flat is a 4th. C to F is a 4th. These are parallel 4ths, and parallel 4ths are 100% okay. And most of the time, this 2-6 chord, if you put scale degree 4 in the bass and 4 in the soprano, then your alto and your tenor should be in the right order in order to not create parallel 5ths and create parallel 4ths instead. And when we go from 2-6 to 5, we just bring all the upper voices down, which is the same way we would connect a 4 chord to a 5 chord. I'm probably going to try to be finished with this live stream at 9 p.m. Eastern, so in like 45 minutes. But if other people have more questions, we'll see how long my voice holds out. Okay, so to move from 2-6 to 5, move all the voices down to the notes in the chord. So we're going to a B flat chord. So we go down to F, and we're going down to B flat in the tenor, and then down to D in the alto. And the reason that I went down is because if I take A flat up to B flat, I would have parallel octaves with my bass. Okay, so again, this sounds like this. Okay, so that is a correctly done FRQ 6. Okay, so we're gonna do FRQ 7, and then after that we'll talk about MCQs. Does it always give you the first chord on every FRQ? The first chord for every FRQ is a root position 1 chord. Okay, and so by the way, I just want to point this out. Check out the soprano and alto right here. Look at this. Wait, I don't want to. Okay, well, anyway, look at it. It's all parallel thirds. It's 100% parallel thirds, and this is correct. Okay, parallel thirds, and if you invert them, parallel 6, are the way that these progressions work almost all the time. Okay, parallel thirds in some of the upper voices. This is correct. Okay. All right, what are we talking about? All right. Okay, so now let's go on to FRQ7. FRQ7 is my favorite. If you haven't, please watch my video on how to crush FRQ7. It works. It really works. It's the hardest FRQ. It's the most fun. It's the only one where you get to be creative, but you have to be creative within specific constraints. So what we're going to do is like there are many possible options, but certain chords don't have options, and we'll do like a simple solution, and then maybe I'll show you a couple like more advanced solutions. And then if you really know what you're doing, you can actually use more applied chords than just the one in this, and it can be kind of fun. Okay, so let's get through this. So we're in D major, and remember how this question works. They give you the first 3 bars of the bass line, and then you have to continue it and harmonize it with the soprano line. Each fermata is a cadence, and it has to be authentic, half, or deceptive. And the final one, they tell you in the directions. The final one has to be a perfect authentic cadence, no matter what. A perfect authentic cadence is always root position 1 to root position 5. Don't invert it. So I see students do that sometimes. Don't invert any of those final 2 chords. Okay, we're in D major, and okay, step 1, do the perfect authentic cadence first. We end on scale degree 1. That means our bass is going to be scale degree 1 in the bass. Oh, down there. Okay. Oh, God. Hey, when muse chord jumps to the next line. Okay. So that's my root position 1 chord, and it has to be preceded by a root position 5 chord. Don't worry about the octave right now. We can change the octaves later. So that's a root position 5 chord. This has to be 5 or 5/7. This has to be 1. This has to be scale degree 5. This has to be scale degree 1. There are no choices. Your only choice is what to put here. And that's 3-2-1 in the bass. If you have 3-2-1 at a cadence, I always put a cadential 6/4, a 1-6-4 chord here. They love to end these FRQ7s 3-2-1. It's not always 3-2-1, but it's very commonly 3-2-1. So look at the last measure. If it's 3-2-1, put 1-6-4, 5-1 in the bass. Technically, you could also use a root position 1 chord here, but this is always going to work better at a cadence. Okay, so step 1, do that cadence first. Step 2, we're going to do the other cadences. And let's start with this one. This is A. This is scale degree 5. This has to be a root position 5 chord. Okay, all of your half cadences should be root position 5 chords. Technically, they can be inverted, but you're more likely to make a mistake if they're inverted. And some people think they shouldn't be inverted. Always make them root position. So that's root position 5. And here is our only scale degree 4. If a fermata ends on scale degree 1, it's always a authentic cadence, either 5-1, 5-1 of some type. Okay, sharp scale degree 4 always is a 5 of 5 chord. And oops, there's another option here, but we're going to stick with the easiest one, 5 of 5, sorry, which is scale degree 2 in the bass. Okay, 5 of 5. If you don't know what I'm talking about, look for the raised scale degree 4 in this question and put a scale degree 2 in the bass and call it 5 of 5. This is the correct answer. This always works. Always. This always works. There's a couple other options that can also work, but we're always gonna, this will always work. Okay, let's do the next fermata. This is scale degree 2. Scale degree 2 has to be a half cadence, scale degree 5 in the bass. So that's a half cadence there. Okay. All right, we have all of our cadences. Okay, if you watch my video, no, the raised 4 is not Lydian. The raised 4 is 5/5 chord. This is not Lydian. I love modes. This is not Lydian mode. This is raised scale degree 4, acting as a 5 chord of the 5 chord. Okay, anyway, if you watch my video, after we do the cadences, there's a funny thing about this, that if you harmonize scale degree 3 with scale degree 1, it's almost always the correct answer. In fact, I think that one is always the correct answer. So I'm going to find every scale degree 3 in the soprano. Here's one. Put a scale degree 1, root position 1 chord under it. Here's another one. Here's another one. Lots of scale degree 3s. Okay? These are all root position 1. Position 1, root position 1. Okay. Now, every scale degree 6, I'm going to harmonize with a root position 4 chord. So here's a 6, here's another 6. Okay, this one has a few other options, and we might change these later on, but this is a very good starting place. This almost always works. Oh, I'm sorry. There's another scale degree 1 up here. So let's put that there. Okay. Okay, so now another trick that I mentioned in that video is, oh, I'm sorry, you can't, my face is in front of the last, I see that now. Let me fix that. Oh, it keeps putting my face in front of the thing. All right, hold on, let's zoom out. I'm sorry, there we go. Hey, now you can see the whole thing. Yes, there we go. Okay, what are we doing? Okay, so scale degree 4 to 3. So from D major, when you have 4 going to 3, you can harmonize it with 7 going to 1, and that is an inversion of a 5/7 chord going to a 1 chord. And sorry, you can switch that. If you have 7/1 in the soprano, you can go 4/3 in the bass. Okay, so I have some 4/3s here, right? Yeah, here's a 4/3. So let me put 7/1 in the bass. And when I do that, that's a 5/6/5 chord, right? Because this is a 5/7 chord. That's the 7th. That's the leading tone. Don't call this a 7 chord. They specifically take points off if you use a root position 7 chord. So don't use 7. Yeah, so yes, this looks like 7, but we're assuming that that there is a soprano, alto, tenor, and bass, and those alto and tenor lines are filling in the chords of the 5/7 chord, not a 7/7. Or no, sorry, not a root position 7 chord. Okay, do I have any other 4s to 3? Yes, I do. I can use that same chord here. And that's fine. Like, don't think that you shouldn't do that. Okay, however, here's a 4 to 3, but I'm already going to scale degree 5 for my 1/6/4 here. So I'm not going to put 7/1 because I already chose that note. I could have done that. I could have gone 5/6/5 to 1 here, but I already want to go to a 5/6/5 because I know that the cadential 6/4 cadence, I'm going to use the cadential 6/4 at a cadence. Yes, you can use them. These are inverted 7th chords. You can use inverted 7th chords. Okay, so I'm not going to put that 5/6/5 chord there. So I'll think of some other chord to use under that 4 chord. Okay, so what else do we have? We have this 1, we have this 5, and we have this 5. Okay, so we just have these few blanks to fill in, and yeah, there's a few options. So we have a 5 going to 6. And I've already chosen that this is a 4 chord. So with the 5, I could make this a 5 chord of some kind, but the one thing you can't do is go from 5 chords to 4 chords. That's like the backwards way of doing things. So I'm instead going to go to, let's use some inversion of 1. Let's start with root position. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to use mostly root position chords, and then maybe I'll change the inversion if something looks better. Okay, and here I could use a 5 chord of some kind, right? Whoops. There we go. Because I'm going to 1, right? So we have 1, 4, 5, 1. That's the correct order of tonic, predominant, dominant, tonic. Okay, and then here we have scale degree 1 going up to scale degree 4, but that's a 5 chord. Okay, so let's put some kind of 1 chord here. In fact, let's just put a root position 1 chord and see what happens. Okay, and then here, that's scale degree 4. Okay, all right, you know what? Yeah, let's just continue with scale degree 4. Like I said, we're gonna see what happens when we do this. Okay, so first of all, look at this and see if you made any weird jumps. And look, I did make a weird jump of a 7th, so I'm going to move that A up an octave. Okay, so, and you can jump an octave here. This is like the one common place to do an octave jump. You could also keep them in the same octave. You can also make it a half note. Okay, what are we doing here? Okay, let's listen to this actually and see what we got. I'm going to start in the 3rd phrase. Hold on, my tempo is super slow. Okay, let's try that again. Okay, this totally works. No, you cannot leap bigger than an octave, and the only place that I really like to leap an octave is from 5 down to 5, specifically at a cadential 6/4. But really, if you have any repeated notes, technically, like I could have jumped that G down an octave if I wanted to. But no, you cannot jump more than an octave. Okay, so we have a lot of stepwise motion. We could do other things though. And in particular, I like to avoid octaves and fifths when I can. So in particular, this G, like we just had a 4 chord. So instead of doing another root position 4 chord, I could invert that chord instead. And I could go to 4/6, right? And anytime I leap a third, do I have any other leap a third? No. Anytime I leap a third, I could fill it in with a passing tone. You don't have to, but you can, right? So this sounds like this now. Okay, and we have that nice voice exchange, and we're going from a root and a third to a root and a third in the opposite voices. Okay. No, you don't need to use passing tones or neighbor tones, but it is a way of getting the bonus musicality point. And I'll talk more about that in a minute. Let's go back and iron out some of these other things. So okay, let's see. Does anybody have any suggestions? I feel like some people made suggestions in the chat, but it's moving so quick, I've lost them. Any suggestions on something to do differently that I have done? I can see a couple places. Could use a 6 chord between 5 and 5/6/5. Where's the 5 and the 5/6/5? Oh, right here. No, this is, you actually can't use a 6 chord here because, let's listen to it. Okay, those are parallel fifths. This is actually an unequal fifth, and then a perfect fifth, and then another perfect fifth. Okay, this is one place we could not do that, just because of the notes that are there. If the soprano was doing different notes, it might be possible to use a sixth chord. Okay, so we can't put a sixth chord there, but oh, I'm sorry, we're talking about here. Yes, sixth chord, this one. Hey, yes, we can do this. Okay, so and if we do that, you can see that we have a big jump here. So we need to move something by an octave. Either one works. Let's move these guys down an octave. Hey, look at that. There we go. Yes, good. Okay, so this sixth chord now makes this line totally stepwise in the bass. And that is totally correct. Okay, so yes, great job. Okay, is there anything else to do? This looks pretty good. So I think that this would get the 9 out of 9. So remember the reason, not the reason, what am I saying? The way to get the 9 points on FRQ7, the 9th point, is to use as much contrary motion, stepwise motion, independent rhythms when possible, and imperfect intervals, meaning we use lots of thirds and sixths and try to avoid octaves and fifths except at cadences. So I hate that my face keeps ending up in front of this. Okay, there we go. Okay, so there's just a couple other things that we could do differently. I want to talk specifically about this measure. Under sharp scale degree 4, we have to use an applied chord to 5. Root position 5 of 5 will always work. This works. There's nothing wrong with this. But when this goes 3, sharp 4, 5 like this, there's a cool thing that you can do, which is we're going to put a B there instead. And since we have a leap of a third, we can fill that in with a passing tone. And now this is a B, which this is a sixth under there. Like I said, we're going to use mostly thirds and sixths. That's a sixth. This chord, this is a 5-4-3 of 5. 5-4-3 of 5. You can also call this a 7. Oh no! Whoa! Hold on. Not that. That's not right. Here we go. 5, 6 of 5. Okay. The reason these are both options is because we're only writing 2 of the voices, and these would both work. And yeah, look at this. Beautiful contrary motion. We love that. Okay, so if your soprano goes 3, sharp 4, 5, you can do this. If this is scary to you, if you don't know what this means, don't worry about it. You don't have to use it. But when we do, I mean, just look how much of our line is stepwise. That's 100% stepwise. Okay, that's also stepwise. And hey, you know what? I could make that a 1-6 chord. And make it completely stepwise except for the cadence. Okay? So that is an option as well. Okay, hold on. There was something else I wanted to... Nope, that doesn't work here. Never mind. Okay. Yeah, so 3, sharp 4, 5 is super common on FRQ7. It's very likely to be this. It's not always this. I've seen them go 6, sharp 4, 5 or 2, sharp 4, 5. I think there was one year they even did this. I think they even did 1, sharp 4, 5. And by the way, just don't write this if you get the chance. This is not technically wrong. This is a leap of a tritone. In real music, you are allowed to leap a tritone if it resolves by step in the opposite direction, which this one does. But don't worry. You're more likely to get it wrong if you're going the wrong direction. But sometimes they do that. I've seen it in the bass line too, which I wish they wouldn't do to you. That just confuses you. Okay. All right. Okay. Anything else on FRQ 7? Okay. Let me know if you have any questions on FRQ 7 in the live stream. And then once we finish that, we'll go on to some multiple choice vocabulary and just things to watch out for. I always use the Roman numeral used before the second fermata. Get a musicality point right. No, don't write dynamics. They do not grade dynamics or articulations or anything like that. Just try to get the musicality point with using stepwise motion and contrary motion, most importantly, and maybe a few passing tones and maybe a few places where the rhythms are different. If do re mi isn't in the soprano, okay, hold on. When should you use a half note? Actually, that's a good question. Let me talk about that in a second. Mi, re, do. Okay, the last 3 notes in the soprano. Okay, let's zoom in on the last chord. Okay, this bar, they love to end 3, 2, 1. They love to end mi, re, do. Sometimes it's fa, re, do. It's 4, 2, 1. Technically, you could have like a 7, 2, 1. And then this last one can be a leading tone. So you might have 1, 2, 1. You might have 6, 7, 1. You might have 5, 7, 1. You might have 2, 7, 1. These are all possible endings. The most common one, like I said, is 3, 2, 1. The next most common one after that is 4, 2, 1. And the way to harmonize 4, 2, 1 is usually either a root position 4 chord or a 2, 6 chord. Those two things look the same way. They both have scale degree 4 in both voices. This is the next most common way to see this ending. If this is mi, re, do, you should make this a 1, 6, 4, 5, 1. If it's a do, ti, do, 1, 7, 1, you should also make it, make it a 1, 6, 4. Okay. If it's 3, 2, 1, 1, 7, 1, those should be the cadential 6, 4. If it's not, then you cannot use a cadential 6, 4. You can only use a cadential 6, 4 if it's 1, 2, 1 or 3, 2, 1. I think last year the exam did not have 3, 2, 1. I think it was 4, 2, 1. And some student I talked to used a cadential 6, 4 because they thought that they always had to. And no, you do not always have to use a cadential 6, 4. If it's 3, 2, 1 or 1, 7, 1, it's the best choice, but it's not the only way to end it. The final cadence will always be a perfect authentic cadence. This will always end 2, 1 or 7, 1. Always. They're not going to put a half cadence there because the directions literally say you have to end with a perfect authentic cadence. So they will make that possible. They won't give you something that's impossible to do. It must end on a perfect authentic cadence, right? 1, 6, 3. It's never going to end 1, 7, 3. It's never going to end that way. 2 chords, and if you only use 2 chords in a few of the measures. No. So there's. Okay, so let's talk about half notes for a second. So I could have put a half note there, right? Let's put this back the way it was. I could have done this. Except let's put it in the right octave so that it's not jumping a seventh. Okay, that is totally fine. You can use half notes, and you're probably going to use half notes in places where the soprano is going a third from the first one to the next one. That's the only way that's usually going to work, right? Unless we had like maybe with a 5/7 chord. Okay, so we could put a half note there. We could also put a half note here as a 1 chord, because these notes are all in a 1 chord. Okay, I mean, I don't like that as much, but that is possible. You can always use a half note on beats 3 and 4 or on beats 1 and 2. You cannot use a half chord, like say, okay, so I'm totally changing what I had here, right? Okay, say this was my melody. No, let's put an A there. Sorry. Okay, say this was my melody. I could not do this. This does not work. Okay, so you may have seen the directions mention this. What this is a syncopated harmonic rhythm, which means that is going from a weak beat to a strong beat. Okay, so we are always going to change chords every quarter beat, with the exception that on beats 1 and 2 or beats 3 and 4, you can have the same note and make it a half note. Okay. All right, just looking at the chat real quick. Okay, all right, guys. I am going to go grab some more water because my throat is very dry from talking for 2 hours. So I'll be right back, but I'm going to, what am I going to do? We're going to look at some multiple choice stuff now. So I'm going to stop sharing my MuseScore screen and share the PDF. Okay, so let's see. What am I doing? Oh, it's this one. Sorry. There we go. Okay, let's get up a page with some good vocab. This has some good vocab. Okay. Let's close that. Can we all see this? Okay, look over this. Look over any words that you don't know. I'm going to run and get some water, and then I'll be back in 2 minutes, and we'll talk through multiple choice questions and how to attack this and what some of these words mean. Okay? Let me know if you have any questions in the chat, and I'll be back in 2 minutes. All right, how are we doing? Any words we don't know? You know, I think terrace dynamics might not be on the test. This is from 2016. They did remove some of the in 2019 they removed some of the words. Okay, all right. All these words we need to know. Okay. Boom, boom, boom. All right, so basso continuo. That means in the Baroque period, when they would write a bass line with figured bass, the basso continuo were the instruments that played that bass line. It was usually a bass and or a cello and or a bassoon playing the bass line, and instruments like a harpsichord or a lute playing the chords. So this the answer to this question will only be basso continuo if you hear a harpsichord or maybe an organ. That's usually what it is. It's a harpsichord plus stringed instruments, or sometimes like if you're listening to like a Bach Passion or one of his bigger pieces done in the church, sometimes it's an organ with a cello. But yeah, that's what basso continuo is. That's where figured bass comes from. That's the basso continuo part was the bass line with the figured bass numbers. Alberti bass. Alberti bass is specifically this. So it's when you have a chord and you arpeggiate notes of the chord in a pattern that's like an accompaniment pattern for a keyboard. So Alberti bass is only going to be if the question is if you're listening to a piano or a harpsichord and they're just playing, you know, the alternating notes of a chord one at a time like that. That's the only time it's going to be Alberti bass. Terrace dynamics. This is a weird thing. So this is in the Baroque period. Instead of using crescendos and decrescendos, they would just go from piano, 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 piano to forte, 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 forte. It's a jump in dynamics. It's like subito forte, subito piano. There's no crescendos and no decrescendos. And I don't know if you guys ever learned this, but in the way that agriculture used to be done on a hillside, you know, if the rain comes down the hill, it just rolls down the hill. But they would cut what's called a terrace, like you'd cut flat parts into the hill side, and so then you'd have like different levels of the of farming. So like that's what a terrace is, like different levels with no slope in between them. So that's why it's called that. So the answer would only be terrace dynamics if it's probably a Baroque piece. Again, all these end up being Baroque pieces. And you hear loud and soft suddenly with no crescendo or decrescendo in between them. Okay, bass pedal point. Hopefully you know what that is. That's just a note that stays still while the chords change. So like we have a 5 chord here, but there's still a 1 in the bass, right? That's just a bass pedal point. The bass doesn't move. Okay. Do we know all these other words? Okay, so multiple choice. Did you guys do any practice exams? If you've done the College Board questions, it's sort of like this. The thing that you need to realize about these is look at what this says. Questions 13 through 17 are based on an excerpt from the symphonic movement. The first section will be played 3 times. And then the second section will only be played once. And then the entire thing will be played once. So this is confusing. So they're going to play 3 times. Why 3 times? They want you to answer these 3 questions. Okay. You don't get to hear it as many times as you want, and you kind of have to look at multiple things at once. This is where it gets kind of strange. So they're going to play melody. I'm sorry, they're going to play a real musical example, a symphonic work. You're going to have to listen to the opening pitches, and it's one of these three things. And so if we look at this, okay, hopefully this is, not crazy stuff. This is bass clef. It's in 3/4, and we're going to have one of these three melodies. Let me play them so that we understand what they're asking here. So here's A. Sorry. Okay, there it is. Okay, or B. Okay, or C. Okay, or D. Okay, those are all different. Two of them, the first two start on scale degree 5. The last two start on scale degree 1. This one ends on scale degree 3. This one ends on scale degree 5. This one ends on scale degree 5. This one ends on scale degree 1. So what you want to do is listen for that. And, they're really asking you about scale degrees, right? We should be able to look at this, know what key we're in, know that it is going to be one of these three options. So I have to hear, did it go 5-1, or did it go 1-3, or whatever, and then also line it up with whatever happens after that. And sometimes this will be pitches like this. Sometimes the pitches will all be the same and the rhythms will be different, and you'll have to figure out which rhythm was played. Okay, and then they ask you to identify what it's played by. Hopefully we know the difference between oboes, which are high woodwinds, and bassoons, which are low woodwinds, and then whether or not there are brass playing or brass and woodwinds. If I recall correctly from this, I think the answer was this, but I don't have the playback anymore for this. Okay, on which harmony does the first section end? So questions like this are, two things can happen. One, it's just a cadence in the key that we're in. So if it's an authentic cadence or a plagal cadence, it ends on the tonic. If it's a half cadence, it ends on the dominant. If it's a deceptive cadence, it ends on the submediant. But sometimes that final chord, there will be an applied chord. Like we could go, like maybe there was a 5/7 of 4, and then it ends on a 4 chord, or like a 5/5 ending on a 5, or 5/6 ending on a 6. Those are all possible. So try to just figure out what the chord is that you're hearing at the end. Sometimes it's a cadence. Sometimes it's not really a cadence. Sometimes it's like I said, an applied chord to another note. Okay. All right. So that's one example of some words that are on the test. Let's look at another one. Okay. So there's questions like this. Again, they're going to play different parts of this at different times. This one was hard. The opening harmonic progression. This was a horrible question. If you did this practice exam, this is a horrible question. You see a bunch of Roman numerals. So this is like harmonic dictation, but you don't know when the chords are changing. And that was the problem I had with this question. These chords all lasted different amounts of time, and it was hard to tell what was what. So they all start on 1. These first two go to 5. These last two go to 5/6. So what I would be listening for, does the bass go do, ti, or does it go do, sol, right? So you have to know like which bass notes they are on. And then they change from there. So, and then also, does it end on a 5 chord, or does it end on a 1 chord? So those are all clues to that question. Okay, do we all know our meter types? Simple duple is 2/4. Simple quadruple is 4/4. Compound triple is 9/8. Compound quadruple is 12/8. So the thing about this is there's no real way to differentiate 4/4 from 2/4 when you're just listening to it, which makes me think that neither one of those are going to be the right answer, because you can't tell those apart. Two bars of 2/4 are the same as one bar of 4/4, and there's no way to orally tell those apart without seeing the music. So that makes me think that this is probably 9/8 or 12/8. And I'm saying time signatures. This could be 12/8. It could also be, I'm sorry, this could be 9/8. It could also be 9/16 or 9/4. We don't know what the bottom number is, but compound means there's 3 subdivisions and triple means there's 3 big beats. So 3 times 3 is 9. And compound means there's 3 subdivisions. Quadruple means there's 4 big beats. 3 times 4 is 12. Okay. They will ask a question, like they always ask a question with these words. So make sure you know what these words mean. Simple means each beat has 2 notes, like 2/8 notes. Compound means each beat has 3 notes, like 3/8 notes, and the big beat would be like a dotted quarter. Okay, some other things. So questions like this, they're gonna ask things like this. What scale degree does the melody do? Is it 1 3 4 5, 1 4 5 6, 5 1 2 3, 5 2 3 4? Those are all similar. Like if I play those, they all have the same contour, right? So you have to know, like, okay, that was a leap of a third, that was a leap of a fourth, and you have to know where scale degrees 1 and 5 are, right? Okay. What else? Cadences. So on the FRQs, none of the FRQs will use a plagal cadence, but a plagal cadence might be the correct answer on one of these multiple choice questions. The reason is, in real music, plagal cadences usually come after authentic cadences. And on the short FRQs that we do, there's no room for that. So there's no room for them to do plagal cadences. But in real music that we're listening to, that could be an answer. Okay. Well, let's see. What else? Okay, some words here. I'm not completely sure these are still on the test, but let's just talk about it. Okay, imitation means there will be a melody, like, and then a different voice is going to do the same thing, like, while the other one does something else. So it's going to imitate what that other voice did, probably at a different level. So this was, and then it imitated it a fifth lower. It played the same notes, but transposed at a different pitch level. Okay, so that's imitation. That's just a very generic word. Canon at the octave would mean there's a melody, and then that melody happens exactly the same way, an octave lower in a different voice. So that's a type of imitation. That's a specific type of imitation. So the answer would be imitation if it was very general. It would be canon at the octave if a different voice played the same melody as another voice, an octave lower or higher. Augmentation. Okay, there's 2 words here. Technically, we want to say rhythmic augmentation. When you augment something, you make it bigger. And if you make a rhythm bigger, you make it slower. So if you had a melody that went, okay, the augmentation would be, like, you'd make each note value twice as long. So augmentation is making the notes longer. The opposite is diminution. So it's like, augmented to diminished, but we're talking about the rhythms. So if you go twice as fast, that's rhythmic diminution. And then inversion is when the notes go in the opposite order. So if we had this, then the inversion would be, okay, so this was up a third, up a step, up a step. So then we go down a third, down a step, down a step. So they just go in the opposite directions. Okay, so that's more multiple choice. Okay, let's do one more of these and then we'll look at the multiple choice that is not based on the RO questions. Okay, so again, they're going to play a piano excerpt with the first section played twice, second section played twice, last section played once. Okay, so notice that. First section is played twice, second section is played twice, last section is played, or the whole thing is played once. That means they're going to play it 5 times and there's 6 questions. So you have to read all of these and read them and answer them while you're listening to them. This is where it starts to get tricky. Okay, so you're going to listen for what the final chords qualities are of the phrases. The arpeggiated feature, passage features, sequence, dotted rhythms, augmentation, positores. Okay. A sequence is when you have a melody or a chord progression. Let's say it's 2 bars long, and then you copy and paste it up a step, and all the notes and relationships stay the same, but you've moved everything up a step, or down a step, or down a third, or up a fourth, or up a fifth. Okay, so if you have okay, so I have, that's the first thing, and now it's a sequence because I copied and pasted it up a step, and then copied and pasted it up a step again. That's a sequence. And that's very common in Baroque music, especially Vivaldi. Like if you listen to Vivaldi's Four Seasons, he does sequences all the time. And probably those chords too. Dotted rhythms, just any, instead of, maybe there's like a section of the music that's, and then it goes, okay, so they're asking you to identify like, oh, it wasn't dotted and now it's dotted. Augmentation, again, that's the note values are twice as long. An appoggiatura, I like to think of an appoggiatura like a suspension, except you jumped to it. So if a suspension is like this, I have F, F, E, right? An appoggiatura would be if you jumped to that F from a different note, like, right? So instead of it being tied over, you jumped to it. And suspensions and appoggiaturas are usually accented and you can lean on them and then they resolve. Okay. Introduction. Okay. Parallel, relative. Okay. So parallel and relative keys. If you're in C major, the parallel minor is C minor. The relative minor is A minor. Parallel keys share the same tonic. Relative keys share the same key signature. Okay, all right, here's some good words. Hemiola, syncopation, anacrusis, and cross rhythm. Hemiola is 3 against 2, and there's a few different ways that it can happen, but it's anytime, it's specifically 3 against 2 in some manner. It can be 3 and 2 combined together. It can be the older I think more correct term is when you're in 3/4 and it's dot 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 dot, and then you have 2 bars of 3/4 that you momentarily accent like they're 3 bars of 2/4. So you're going dot 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 dot. Right? So that's hemiola. Syncopation is anytime you accent the weak beats. And anacrusis is just the fancy word for an upbeat or pickup. So bum bum is anacrusis. And cross rhythm is specifically if you had like triplets and eighth notes or 16th notes against each other. So you're hearing two different patterns and the resulting rhythm from combining those two things, which can be different than hemiola because hemiola sort of happens over time and not at the same time. But sometimes they can be both used in a similar way. Yeah, I don't know. I don't think that these usually do have cross rhythm. I feel like that's not usually the answer. Okay, yes, that is what basso continuo means. Yeah, so hemiola usually means if you're in 3/4 and you have 2 bars of 3/4. Think of 2 bars of 3/4. You have six quarter notes altogether. So you're going 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3, and then momentarily after the 1 2 3 1 2 3, you're going to go 1 2 1 2 1 2. So hemiola like takes up more time, whereas a cross rhythm can just be a triplet against a duplet anywhere. It's not necessarily combining two adjacent bars of different rhythms. Okay, what else? Oh, texture. Okay. All right. These are annoying words. Okay, the word's not on here, but monophony, monophonic means a melody by itself. So a solo singer or a bunch of people playing or singing in unison is monophony. Polyphony is when you have multiple melodies at the same time. Imitative polyphony would mean like a fugue, like there's a melody and then another voice does the same melody in a different place and they all start overlapping. You have multiple melodies, multiple different rhythms at the same time. Melody with accompaniment means there's a melody and you have chords somehow. Melody with a counter melody means there's one main melody and then a second one that's doing something different. And then chordal homophony. What they mean by that is SATB writing that we normally do. All of these are moving in the same rhythm, chord, chord, chord. That's chordal homophony. Homophonic means they're all doing the same thing. Chordal homophony is what that is. So yeah, they will ask you questions about texture. This comes up a lot. Yeah, and heterophony is the weirdest one. And actually, let me. Hey, yeah, it's this one. Okay, so take a look at this one. Is that one on here? Yeah. Did anybody do this? Did anybody do 2016 released exam with your teacher? This question was so it's so cool. It's an East Asia, it's a Tibetan folk song. And they always put one question. This is so silly. They always put one question that is either something that's from non-Western music. So this is from Asia, or jazz, which is silly, right? Oh, good. A bunch of you did this. Yeah. Okay. Oh, that's right. There was a pop song. Yeah. So there's always something that's non-classical. It can be non-Western, or it can be pop, or it can be jazz. And usually that means there's going to be some rhythmic stuff to identify. And if it is, I don't know, if it's non-Western, then the answer might be heterophonic. It's very rare for them to ask a question about the texture of Western music and have it be heterophonic. So heterophonic means, and if you did this question, there is a plucked instrument and a voice, and they're singing the same notes, but like doing different rhythmic stuff. And that's what heterophony is. They're doing the same melody, but executing it in a different way at the same time. So the fact that the plucked instrument was playing more notes than the voice was singing, but the pitches were still all lining up, that's what heterophony is. In Western music, sometimes, okay, do I have anybody who plays bass or cello or bassoon? And have you ever been playing music in your ensemble where everybody's playing in unison and all of the upper voices do a trill, but you don't get to do a trill on a bass instrument because they think that bass instruments can't play a trill? That's heterophony, because you're doing the same thing, but some of the voices are adding an ornament or decoration and other voices are not. Okay, so has that happened to people? Yeah. Bassoons can trill, cellos can trill, basses can trill. Yeah. So just put the trill in there anyway, right? Okay. All right. So yeah, there will be one question where they will ask something that is non-Western, and a lot of times if it's jazz, there will be a much more complicated rhythm, probably with swung eighth notes and or triplets. But it'll look just like this. They give you all four options and you have to pick which one it is, right? Okay, any other questions on the listening? Actually, let's go back to the beginning of so the beginning of the test starts with the multiple choice listening. And it's going to be stuff like this. And if you watched any of my shorts on YouTube, I did a bunch of these like this. They'll play one of these four things, and you have to look at this and say, okay, this is a major scale. This is an ascending melodic minor scale. This is a Dorian scale. And this one is a natural minor scale. So you have to hear one of these four things and identify which one it is, right? Okay, and then things like this. So look at this. There's four chords. They're going to play one of these. All of them have a C in the bass, and they all have an A or an A flat. Okay, so you have to look at what kind of chord this is. Okay, what do we have? A, C, A, E. That's an A minor in first inversion. Look at this. This is an A minor in first inversion too, but a different notes on top. And at least here, the soprano and the bass are the same, right? So you have to identify some pretty similar sounding chords, right? So A minor in first inversion, A minor in first inversion with the third in the soprano, A flat in first inversion. And then look at this one. What do we have here? F minor in second inversion. Okay, so that's how you do this. You have to look at those, figure out what they are, and then match to what you're hearing. So if you hear a minor chord, you know it's not this one. This is the only major chord. The other ones are minor. These two are in first inversion. This one's in second inversion. This one has a different note. Okay, so it's chords like that, things like that. Let's see what else. Oh my gosh, this is almost exactly what I put. I didn't mean to do that. This is almost exactly what I put on the shorts. So they're going to play one of these. They usually do this with seventh chords. They play them arpeggiated like this, and you have to identify which type of chord this is. It's bass clef, D, F, A flat, C. So that one's half diminished. This one's a minor seventh chord. This one's a dominant seventh chord. This one's a major seventh chord. So you have to identify what it is and then hear which one it is. Okay, one question, probably only one question is going to have alto or tenor clef, and it'll be something like this. It'll be something like they're going to play an interval and they're going to put them all on alto clef, or they're going to put them all on tenor clef, or it might be one of these ones, like it might be the arpeggio or the scale. One question will have alto or tenor. Okay, so what notes are these? That's a B to a G. So you have to be like, okay, that's a B to a G. That's a minor sixth. B to G sharp, major sixth. B to A, minor seventh. B to A sharp, major seventh. Okay, and then hear which of those interval it is. So this is really just a more complicated interval identification question. Okay, this one. Okay, so look at this. These all start with E, D in the eighth notes, and they jump down to either A, G, or G, and then go up to either a B flat or a B. So you have to hear, is that jump a fourth or is it a fifth? And is the second jump a minor third or a major third? Okay. All right, same thing. All the rhythms are the same. Usually when they ask questions like this, take a look at the first half of this bar is the same in A and B, and it's the same in C and D. And then the second half of the bar is the same in B and C, but different in D and A. Okay, so it's usually like that. So I would just follow along with one of these, see if what you're listening to matches. If it doesn't, okay, you're like, all right, I didn't hear this. It must be this other one. And then listen for the second half. It's usually how you do those. Okay. All right. Anything else? Okay. Have you guys done this question where they're going to play this musical example and there are 4 mistakes? And every time I've done one of these, there's one of each type: 1 treble clef pitch, 1 bass clef pitch, 1 treble clef rhythm, 1 bass clef rhythm. Okay. Do I have a favorite, most useful classical piece to recommend listen to? Stuff being on the exam. Asher Clark, do you mean for harmony and chords, or more for some of the stuff they ask on the multiple choice, like texture and scale degrees and things like that? Texture. Let me think about that. Yeah, I'll have to think about that. Okay, let's see. All right, what else do we want to talk about? Okay, so let's go on to the written non-aural part. So again, you start off with the multiple choice with listening, and then you go to part B, which is non-listening multiple choice. And you have a few questions like this, where it's like, in a major key, which of the following diatonic triads contains the leading tone? Okay, so which of these chords contains the leading tone? 1, 2, 5, or 6? Only one of those contains the leading tone. No, there's not only one question. This question gets its own page. I don't know why. That's page 1. Here's page 2. Yes, it's a 5 chord. 5 chord contains the leading tone. Okay, that was page 1. Page 2, which of these is beamed correctly? When you're doing your melodic dictation, you don't have to beam things correctly, but they will ask you how to beam things correctly on this. And if we're in 4/4, we want to be able to see every quarter beat. And that rules out the first 2 because they beamed a beat and a half there together for A and B. Okay, so it has to be C or D. And they want to see every quarter beat like this. You might see D in real music, but this is the most correct because we can see every quarter note. That first beam contains all the notes of that first quarter beat. So does this one. So does this one. This one puts a syncopation over the halfway point in the bar, which some people like to avoid. Yeah, so C is the correct answer for this. Okay. All right. So yeah, there's always like one question on this page, one question on this page. And then this page has the music, and then a whole bunch of questions about that music. So things like this, the interval between the pitches. Okay, so between the violin and the viola. Okay, so for this one, you would also have to read alto clef. And hold on one second. Let me see if I can change the view on this. Where's my view? One sec, guys. No, get out of here. Sorry, I'm trying to make it look at 2 pages at once, and it's not cooperating with me. What do I have to do? Hey, 2-page view. There we go. Okay. Is it the right 2 pages? Oh, good, it is. Okay, here we go. Okay, so they'll ask questions like at measures 48 and 49, there is a temporary tonicization of something. Okay, let's go to 48 and 49. So, all right, what key are we in? We're in C major. And in 48 and 49, take a look at that. What do we have? We have a C sharp and a B flat and a C sharp, and then we go to D. Yeah, okay, so think about that. We're in C major, and then in these 2 bars, we have a C sharp and a B flat. What chord? Not what chord. What key contains a C sharp and a B flat? It would be D minor, right? The D minor. And if we're thinking about it in terms of applied chords, a C sharp is going to be the leading tone of D, right? So yeah, the answer there is just D minor. Okay. Okay, they might have a question like this. Let's just talk about these words for a minute. The structure of measures 42 through 47. Okay. All right, let me look at this music. Okay. 42 through 47. All right. Okay, let me try to play the violin one part and see. Now you don't get to do this on the test. You don't get to play it, but okay, so what they're asking for here is the form of this phrase, and a parallel period and a double period are going to have 2 sections that are the same length. And a parallel period means you have like 2 bars and 2 bars, or 4 bars and 4 bars. And each half starts the same way. And in a parallel period, usually the first half will start one way and with a half cadence. And then the second one will start one way, the same way, and then with an authentic cadence. So they start the same way, end differently. A double period is just any 2 phrases that don't have that same repetition, that have the same length. And then either a single phrase with a cadential extension or a single phrase with a sequential repetition. So it's one of those 2, because this phrase 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It was 6 bars long. It wasn't 3 plus 3. It was 4 plus 2. And so we can tell that it goes down a scale to be 5. That feels like a half cadence. And then it just sort of extended that cadence. Okay. And it's not sequential repetition, because that means we would have to have something that was then repeated again, that was then repeated again. So Yeah, this is single phrase with cadential extension. Okay, so that's a weird one. I don't know if they still ask questions like this on the test, but they do ask some form questions. This is just a really weirdly worded one. Oh, so for the amount of time to spend on this, for the listening, you don't get a choice. The listening goes and you have to follow it. You don't get to hit play like you do on College Board, AP Classroom. You are at the mercy of the recording. So answer the questions as best you can. Don't leave anything blank. Multiple choice. Don't leave anything blank. It's A, B, C, or D. If you leave it blank, it's wrong. You have a 1 in 4 chance of guessing the correct answer, and you can probably narrow it down by eliminating something you think is probably not right, right? So don't leave anything blank, and it just goes through. And then with this section, this is 35 minutes, and there's something like, let's see, we're at 43. What's the last question? 75, 43. Yeah, there's something like 30-ish questions over 35 minutes. So that means you want to spend about a minute on each question. I really think these two questions you guys can do faster than 1 minute each. I think these are easy, right? Some of these are easy. This is where it starts to get tricky, right? Oh, I'm going the wrong way. This is where it starts to get tricky, where you have to look at the music. Okay. All right. Any other words on any of these pages, but we don't know? What if it's transposed in the exact same and it's at a parallel period? No, a parallel period is always in the same key. With the exception that it could perhaps modulate to a different key at the end of the second phrase. But yeah, a parallel period is always going to start. First phrase will start in one key, second phrase will start in the same key. Can I cover 48? Yeah, okay. Which of the following compositional devices is used in the first violin part? Okay, disjunct motion, literal repetition, melodic inversion, melodic sequence. Disjunct and conjunct is just stepwise versus not stepwise. Conjunct is stepwise, disjunct is leaps. So, disjunct motion, okay, this is mostly stepwise, right? There's leaps, there's some leaps. I don't think they mean disjunct by this, right? That's an arpeggio, this is an arpeggio, that's an arpeggio, that's a leap to 5, a leap of an octave. Yeah, a disjunct is going to be lots of jumps back and forth that are disconnected from each other. And the jumps that are here are normal musical jumps. They're not strange. So it's not disjunct motion. Literal repetition is just what those English words mean, the same thing. Melodic inversion is when the melody goes in the opposite direction. And melodic sequence is when you have a melody that is then repeated the same way at a different level. And I think that's what we have here, because right here the violin goes. Yeah, so it's this starts on G, goes down to F, and then it's literally copied and pasted down a step. So that is the melodic sequence. Okay, any other questions? Oh, direct fifths. Okay. Yes, direct fifths, hidden fifths. Okay. All right, so let's go back to MuseScore. Let's go back to MuseScore. Give me a sec here. MuseScore. Okay, here we go. Direct fifths. All right. Okay. All right. Let's do C major. All right. Hold on. Where'd it go? Come back. You score. Please cooperate. Okay. All right. Give me a sec here. I'm trying to think. What do I need to do? Okay. Direct fifths and direct octaves are the same phenomenon. And that is when two voices leap in the same direction and they land on a fifth or an octave. So here, the soprano jumps up to C, the bass jumps up to F. Okay, so that's a direct fifth because they're both jumping in the same direction. So here's the thing with this. It only matters, these are only mistakes that you need to worry about in the soprano and the bass voices together. So direct fifths, hidden fifths, octaves, those don't involve the alto or tenor at all. It has to be bass and soprano together. This is a direct fifth, and this would be a -1 on your part writing or on FRQ 7 because both voices jump to a fifth. And the idea here is that it's not a parallel fifth, but both voices are jumping to it. It makes the fifth stick out. And we don't like fifths or octaves to stick out. They sound empty and less interesting than thirds and sixths. So this is a direct fifth. That's when both voices are jumping. A hidden fifth is when the bass is stepping, but the soprano is leaping. Okay, so listen to this. Okay, so that's a hidden fifth. It's the same thing. They're both going up to a fifth. The soprano is leaping, and that is a problem. So that this, you could get a -1 on your part writing if you do this. It's only a mistake if the soprano jumps. If the bass jumps, it's not a mistake. So if I did this, let me think. Something that actually is harmonized. Okay, so they're both going up to a fifth, but the soprano is stepping there and the bass is jumping. That is okay. And the way that I always remember this is that a soprano voice can always go 3-2-1 at an authentic cadence, and the bass can always leap 5-1. And this 2-1, 5-1, that could be a hidden fifth, right? Or hidden octave. They're both moving in the same direction to an octave. But it's okay when the soprano moves by step and the bass leaps. And the way to remember that is that at a cadence, the soprano is the stepwise voice. Okay, so hidden fifths and direct fifths are minor mistakes that you might get on part writing or FRQ 7, the harmonization. If you move your soprano by step most of the time, it's not going to happen. You can only create one if your soprano is leaping in the same direction as the bass. So if you think it's happening, if you see your soprano jumping and it's jumping in the same direction as the bass, if you have an option of which, like if you're doing the Roman numerals, you might be able to put the bass on the other octave. And if you can't do that, then just don't make your soprano jump there. Okay, it's something that confuses a lot of students and worries a lot of students, but it doesn't actually come up all that often. Voice exchange, voice crossing, and voice overlap is another voice thing. let's talk about those three things. Okay, so voice crossing is when two voices go on the wrong side of each other. And if you're always putting your stems up and your stems down in your two different voices, then on the same staff, that shouldn't happen, right? So that's not voice crossing. It would be voice crossing if you put your stem like that, right? Now my alto goes C, F, and my soprano goes E, D. Okay, so you shouldn't write voice crossing. It shouldn't be possible for you to write voice crossing on the same staff. The place that it usually happens is if you confuse what octave your alto and tenor are in. So the tenor, okay, if I do this, let's delete my soprano. Okay, so now my tenor is leaping higher than where my alto is. You shouldn't have voice crossing unless, like, look at this. You have ledger lines that are sort of in the way of each other, right? You shouldn't have voice crossing unless you're doing something really weird with ledger lines in the middle. Like you have multiple ledger lines above and below the same staff. Okay. So voice crossing probably shouldn't even come up. Voice overlap is a minor mistake, and that is when two voices leap and the second voice goes higher than where the first voice just was. So my alto is jumping up to F, which is higher than the E that the soprano was just on. You can only create voice overlap if two voices leap in the same direction by an interval that is greater than the interval between them, right? So the only way, if they're on a third, the only way to create voice overlap is if they leap in the same direction, both a fourth, which is greater than a third. So that's voice overlap. That's a minor mistake. So don't worry about this too much if you don't understand it. It's only going to happen if you're leaping too much, and you should try not to use too many leaps. And FYI, this is not voice overlap. The alto is going to this note that the soprano was just on. It's the same note. It's not on the other side of it. So as long as it's the same note and not higher than when it was, that's a voice overlap. Okay, so voice crossing, voice overlap, both. Actually, voice crossing might be -2 points, and voice overlap, I think, is -1. I think that's correct. Voice exchange is something you should try to do. Voice exchange is a good thing. Voice exchange, one voice goes 3, 2, 1. The other goes 1, 2, 3. And we're specifically going to find that in this progression. Anytime we go from 1 to a passing 5, 6, 4 to a 1, 6 chord, which sounds like this. Okay, that is voice exchange, and that is something you should try to do in FRQs 5, 6, and 7. Okay. Okay. What other questions can I answer? Hidden fifths and direct octaves were something I wanted to make sure I covered. Let me know in the chat what else you would like me to talk about. Is that just before? Voice exchange can be between any sets of voices. It's normally in the soprano and the bass, but it could be in any order. Say my voices started off in a different order. That's also voice exchange. The voices participating in the voice exchange here are the bass and the alto. So yeah, voice exchange can happen between any sets of voices. I'm trying to alternate the soprano on the fifth and the non-fifth. Sorry, I'm trying to figure out which questions I can answer here. Yeah, Alberti bass, I talked about that a little bit ago. It's and if you know that Mozart a lot of piano player, okay, it's just playing one note of a chord at a time, like an arpeggio in a repeated pattern. It doesn't have to be 1-5-3-5. It can be something else. It's just a repeated arpeggio used as an accompaniment on a keyboard instrument. What instrument do I play? I am a bassoon player. I started on clarinet, and then I played tenor sax, bari sax, and oboe, and then I discovered who I truly was on the bassoon. I love the bassoon. And if you play a bass instrument like bassoon or cello or bass, it really helps you understand the harmony of classical music a lot better, because playing the bass line is very different than playing the other soprano, alto, or tenor lines. If the FRQs, if I read the correct notes for the bass wrong octave. Yeah, on the melodic dictation, if you write, the harmonic dictation. If you write the bass in the wrong octave, they give you credit. If you write the soprano in the wrong octave, you don't get credit. And I think that's because the soprano is not going to leap, and if you had the wrong octave in the soprano, you've done a weird leap. But the bass does weird leaps all the time, so I think they're a little bit more forgiving. That's just the harmonic dictation, though. That's not melodic dictation. FRQ7, how strict is College Board on leaps and skips? I have only a couple thirds and fifths. There's no law about how many leaps you can use on FRQ7. You are more likely to get the bonus point if you have more stepwise motion, but there's not really a hard and fast rule about that, a specific rule. You can use skips. Okay, homophonic. Let's just talk about texture real quick. Monophonic, one melody. Polyphonic, many melodies. Homophonic means there is one melody and everybody else is supporting that melody in some manner. So 4-part writing has the soprano as a melody and everybody else is supporting it. A melody with accompaniment is also homophonic, even though it feels like it's totally different, right? So one melody with no accompaniment, monophonic. Multiple melodies, polyphonic. One melody with everybody else supporting it with harmony is homophonic, and that can take lots of forms. Okay, yeah, we'll talk about find the errors in a second. Let me see what else we have to talk about. Find the errors. Okay, yes. Melodic dictation, getting pitch, but rhythm completely wrong. So yeah, so if you missed the beginning of this live stream, I talked a lot about melodic dictation at the beginning there. Try to get as much pitch and rhythm correct as possible. If the rhythms are wrong, then that half a bar is also wrong, and there's not really like half points when it comes to that. So just do your best that you can. Polyphonic is like fugues. Multiple melodies happening one after another, usually polyphonic. So there's lots of organ fugues. Seventh chords in harmonic dictation. So let me say this about seventh chords. There's only 5 7 chords, 2 7 chords, and 7 7 chords on the AP test. There's no 1 7, there's no 4 7, there's no 6 7, and there's no 3 7. It's just those 3 Roman numerals. So hopefully 5 7 should be the most common, and we should have that one in our ears, the 5 7 chord, and that has scale degree 4 in some voice, which is always going to go down. And in a 2 7 chord, some voice is going to have scale degree 1, which is going to go down to 7. And in a 7 7 chord, which we're usually only going to see in minor, whoever's on the 7th of that chord is going to go down to from scale degree 6 down to 5. The chords that do have 7ths are the chords that do have 7ths are 5 7, 2 7, and 7 7. The chords that don't have 7ths are 1 7, 3 7, 4 7, and 6 7. Okay, the different types of 6/4 chords. There's only 4, and on the part writing, you only have to use 3 of them. Okay, so the pedal 6/4 is when the bass is a pedal tone, stays on the same note through 3 chords. And that's 1, 4 6 4, 1. So that's a pedal 6/4. A passing 6/4 is when the bass does a passing tone like that, and that always has voice exchange. 1 2 3, 3 2 1. That's a passing 6/4. And then cadential 6/4 is always a 1 6 4 going to a 1 chord. And that, I'm sorry, going to a 5 chord. Let me repeat that. A 1 6 4 going to a 5, or a 1 6 4 going to a 5 7. It has scale degree 5 in both chords. The 4th type of 6/4 chord is the arpeggiated 6/4 chord, and that might appear in a multiple choice question. That's something like this. Right, so like the bass is on the root, and then it's on the 5th. So like that's technically a 6/4 chord, right? But really, it's like the whole thing is just a 1 chord, and if in that one moment we look at which note the bass is on, it's just jumping between 1 and 5. It's arpeggiating the notes of the chord, which is why we call it that. Okay, what other questions can I answer? Okay, so I think I am going to stop at 10 p.m. Eastern, which is in 8 minutes. So what else can I talk about in the next 8 minutes? Okay, periods are a type of form. Okay, so a period is where you have 2 phrases of equal length. And normally, it ends with a cadence, and we can talk about them in different ways. So the word parallel period means we're going to have 2 phrases that both start the same way but end differently. So that's usually like a phrase. The first phrase ends with a half cadence. The second phrase ends with a perfect authentic cadence. When we pair phrases off, there's words that we use for the first phrase. It's called an antecedent phrase, and the second phrase is called a consequent phrase. And by setting it up in that manner, with the first phrase, the antecedent phrase ending with half cadence, that makes it feel like the music has to continue on. And so the music repeats, it starts the same way, but then instead of ending with a half cadence, the second time it ends with a perfect authentic cadence. And so what we have in FRQ 7 is this is a double period. We have 2 phrases here and 2 phrases here. These are not parallel because they don't start the same way or anything. Okay, so in this one, we have 2 phrases. This one ends with a perfect or an imperfect authentic cadence. This one ends with a half cadence. By ending the first 2 phrases with a half cadence, this makes the music have to continue on to 2 more. Okay, so parallel just means that you have 2 phrases that start the same way, and period means we're pairing 2 phrases together in some manner. Okay, retrogression. Retrogression means the chords are going in the wrong order. And so when we go from tonic chords to predominant to dominant to tonic, that is the normal order of things. When you do specifically dominant chords going to predominant chords, those are retrogressions. So when you go from 5 to 4 or from 5 to 2, those are the main retrogressions that you're going to come across. And technically, if 6 goes to 1 or 2 goes to 1, those are normally not done either. The ones that you really have to worry about are root position 5 to root position 4, or 5 chords to any 2 chords. Those are the ones that are avoided. But you can go from 5 to 4/6 because it's inverted and it makes a stepwise bass line. So the only place that retrogression is going to come up is on FRQ 7 if you write a root position 5 to a root position 4, or any 5 chord to any 2 chord, and you'll lose, I think, a half a point for those. And then I don't think I've ever seen retrogression on the multiple choice, but it could be possible. And if it were a multiple choice question, it would be pretty obvious that it's going from root position 5 to root position 4, or a 5 chord to a 2 chord. I talked about harmonic and melodic dictation earlier in the live stream. So if you missed that, you can go back and watch it when we're done here. Sight singing. Do you guys want to talk about sight singing? Okay, I'm going to try to do this real quick. Sight singing, you have 75 seconds to practice and 30 seconds to record it. Try your best. If you're really good at rhythm, try to nail the rhythm. If you're really good at pitches, try to nail the pitches. Try to get as much of them as correct as possible. Everything I said about melodic dictation applies to the sight singing questions as well. They always stay within an octave. Most of the jumps are between scale degrees 1 and 5. And so if you know that you're jumping from 1 to 5 or 5 to 1, that'll make things easier. They'll give you a starting pitch. If you're not a good singer and that sounds like it's not going to be in your range, you can transpose it to any key. The most important thing about sight singing is one will be in a major key and one will be in a minor key. And very often I see students correctly sing an entire sight singing question, except it was in minor and they did the whole thing in major. So here's a way to do this. One will be in major, one will be in minor. And the first one doesn't have any notes that are outside of the key, just like the melodic dictation. So if you get your FRQ 8, which is your first sight singing, if it has an accidental, that is a leading tone, and that is a minor key. If there's no accidentals, it's in a major key. And then whichever one FRQ 8 is in, FRQ 9 will be in the opposite. So if your first one is in a minor key, your second one will be in a major key, and vice versa. Students do this a lot. They'll just, it's in E minor, and they just confidently sing it in E major. So just make sure you know whether it's in major or minor, because if you sing it wrong, in the wrong key, in the wrong mode, then you will get, it's really hard to get any points, because if you sing any scale degrees 3 or 6 or 7, they won't be the right ones. So you can only get things right if they only contain scale degrees 2 and 5 and 1. and maybe the leading tone. Real quick with modes, the only questions that might have modes on them, let me go back to the previous exam. The only questions that might have modes on them are usually questions like this one, this very first one, where they're going to play one of these scales, and one of the options is a mode. This mode, this one right here. Oh, that's not even a mode, is it? I'm sorry, that's not a mode. That is the harmonic minor scale. But it is possible that one of these is a mode, like Dorian or Phrygian or Lydian or something. Okay. There's probably only going to be one question that references a mode, and it's probably going to be something like this. The only other thing that I can think of is there might be a listening question where they'll give you music where you have to hear the mode, but they really don't stress modes, so I don't think they're going to do anything too difficult with modes. It's probably going to be something that you can see like this. Yeah, I can't imagine them giving you music that's in Lydian and asking you to identify that it's in Lydian. But since we're talking about modes, if they do something like that, Mixolydian is going to sound like major with a lowered scale degree 7. Lydian is going to sound like major with a raised scale degree 4. Phrygian is going to sound like minor with a lowered scale degree 2. And Dorian is going to sound like minor with a raised scale degree 6. They're not going to ask you about Ionian or Aeolian because they'll just ask you about major or minor. And Locrian is not going to be on the test. At least in, unless they give you a scale and it's just the white keys and they ask you about the modes. I can't imagine that happening though. Modes are a very small part of it. Find the errors. Yeah. So I think there's a find the errors thing here. Let me find it. Oh, there is. Okay, here we go. Why did they put this on 2 pages? Okay. So find the errors. Yeah, let's talk through this. So, okay. Let's talk about the types of errors. So first of all, an unresolved leading tone means there's a leading tone that doesn't go up to 1. So I'm in B minor here, 2 sharps, and here's a B. Okay, so that means an unresolved leading tone, I'm going to have to A sharp that doesn't go to 1. So do I have anywhere where an A sharp doesn't go to 1 in the first bar? No, the soprano goes to 1. Okay, parallel fifths. Hopefully we know what those are. So we're just going to look for pairs of fifths between any of the voices. Direct fifth, like I said, is when the soprano jumps. You have to have a soprano jump in order to have a direct fifth. The soprano does not jump in the first bar. And then unresolved chordal seventh. So a chordal seventh that goes up instead of down. And this F sharp, A sharp, C sharp, E, that is a F sharp 7. That's a 5/7. This E goes up to F sharp. It doesn't resolve down. Right? So that is the unresolved chordal seventh in bar 1. Okay, bar 2, questions like this. This bar contains all of these errors except which one? So poured chord succession, incorrect use of a 6/4 chord, melodic augmented second, incorrect spacing. Okay, let's talk about what these are. Melodic augmented second is when you go from scale degree 6 and it's not raised to scale degree 7 that is raised. Or just any steps that are next to each other, but the step in the scale has been raised. One of them has been raised. In order to have an augmented second, you have to have a raised note. Okay, so do we have any raised notes here? We do. We have a G sharp, and this goes down. I'm sorry, we have an A sharp that goes down to G. So A sharp to G is an augmented second. So that is one of the errors. So that's not the answer because they're asking for which one isn't there. Incorrect use of a 6/4 chord. Okay, do we have a 6/4 chord? B, C sharp, A sharp, F sharp, F sharp. Yes, this is an F sharp. This is a 5-6-4 chord, right? F sharp over C sharp. Is it incorrect? Yes, it is, because it is not passing, because the C sharp doesn't go up to D. It's not a pedal, it's not a cadential, and it's not arpeggiated. So that is incorrect. So those two are not good. And frankly, if there's a 6-4 chord that's wrong, that also means there's poor chord succession, because it didn't do what it was supposed to do. What chord does it even go to here? C sharp, G, G, E. What even is that? It's a root position 2 diminished chord. So we're not going to go from 5 to 2. That's a retrogression. 5 to 2 is a retrogression, which is poor chord succession. Okay, so those three are all present, which means there should not be incorrect spacing. Incorrect spacing is more than an octave between the soprano and the alto, or more than an octave between the alto and tenor. And here's a G to a G in the alto and tenor. You can have an octave, that's fine. So this is the correct answer. There is no incorrect spacing. Okay, which of the following errors occurs in measure 3? Okay, so bar 3, let's talk about these are direct fifth. That means I have to have a leap in the soprano. I don't have a leap in the soprano, so it's not that. Parallel octaves. Okay, do I have any octaves? Here's a B and a B. That's not parallel. E to E, F sharp to F sharp. There it is. That's the parallel octave. Okay, if you want to rule these other ones out, there's no incorrect spacing. Nobody's more than an octave apart. Doubled leading tone, there's only one leading tone. All right, final cadence contains which of the following errors? Parallel octaves, overlapping voices, that's voice overlap, talked about earlier. Melodic augmented second, and incorrectly resolved suspension. Okay, we talked about most of the rest of these. Let's talk about an incorrectly resolved suspension. Suspensions go down by step, just like chordal sevenths. And we do have a tied note here that looks like a suspension, right? And that's a B, 1 chord, B minor chord. So that should be a 4-3 suspension. That E should go down, and it doesn't. It goes up. So that is an incorrectly resolved suspension. Listen to the recording and find the rhythm or pitch error in the soprano and the bass. Yeah, there's not much to talk about here. It's just you have to do it. You have to try it. They will play this question 4 times, and they will have one of each of these errors. And so what I would do is just follow along with the bass line. And if you see something that doesn't look right, circle it. Hopefully the rhythms should stick out to you. Sometimes the pitch is kind of tricky because I don't remember what the answer is here, but look at this. You have an E down to an E. Okay, sometimes what they'll do is, instead of playing this, they'll like move this second E up to a G. So like it's jumping to another line. It's just off by a third, and it's a big jump. So sometimes it's something like that. Sometimes it's something like this D to F sharp. Instead, they played like a D to a G or something. So you just have to follow along, try to notice the pitch mistakes. And yeah, I would, instead of reading these, just look at this and circle the mistakes. And then when you see which, bars you have a mistake in, then go put the right answer there. For rhythm, sometimes I feel like the rhythm sticks out. Sometimes they'll like dot an 8th note and put a 16th note in. And so like if you see that there's no 16th notes and you hear a fast note, you're like, oh, obviously that's a rhythm thing. I remember one of these, they put in like a triplet somewhere. So again, a triplet should stick out. If you don't see any triplets and then you hear 3 notes in the space of 1, that should stick out to you. Okay, there's no Neapolitan chord on the exam. However, the Neapolitan chord is super cool, and I have a video about it, and you should watch it. But not tonight, after the exam. And yeah, it is a predominant chord. the Neapolitan chord. Do you pay attention to individual measures? Yeah. So for this, find the mistakes, follow the soprano line, and try to notice where there's a mistake, and then follow the bass line and try to notice where there's a mistake. Circle the mistake or circle the bar you think the mistake is in, and then go and see if it lines up with one of these options. Chord identification in MCQs. What do you mean chord identification in multiple choice questions? They're like this one where they ask you about the Roman numerals. Yeah, so this questions like this, I talked about this earlier a little bit, but just to remind everybody, this means a specific baseline, right? These each mean a specific baseline. This means scale degree 1, 5, 6, 1, 6, 5. This one means the letter D means 1, 7, 6, 6, 5, 1, right? So follow along with the baseline because all of these indicate different baselines. There's some overlap, but that's what we have to listen for. So just listen to the bass and try to figure out which scale degrees it is. So it's like you're doing Roman numeral things and writing the bass line, except instead of writing it, you're listening for which scale degrees you're hearing. Does that make sense? On voice to audio dictation, you focus on the soprano. For harmonic dictation, I personally would focus on the bass first because the bass is only going to follow specific patterns, right? If the bass is on the leading tone, it's going to go up. You're going to jump from 1 to 4 to 5 a lot. You're going to go from 5 to 6, 5 to 1. It's going to do certain things, and that should lock in what you think the Roman numerals are. But some people are really good at hearing the soprano and really bad at hearing the bass. And the whole point of this test is to get as many points as you can. If you can get more points by focusing on the soprano a lot and not trying to do two things at once, then do that. But if you can hear both the bass and the soprano, I would start with the bass because the soprano can help you figure out what the Roman numerals are, but the bass tells you for sure what they are and what the inversion is. So it gives you a lot more information. Yeah, let's talk about let's talk about 6/4 chords again. Let me share this. Okay. Let's do this. Okay, real quick. 6/4 chords. A pedal 6/4. Whoops. This is a pedal 6/4 chord. It is when the bass stays on the same note through 3 chords and the middle chord has a 6/4 and it's going to be a 4/6/4 chord. That's a pedal 6/4. A passing 6/4 is when the bass makes a passing tone between 3 chords, and we have. Just kidding. There we go. We have 1, 5, 6, 4, 1, 6. That's passing because the bass note is a passing tone. Cadential 6/4 happens at cadences, and it's specifically. Oh no, I'm in the wrong key. No wonder that sounded bad. There we go. Okay. Pedal 6/4. Nope, I'm sorry. Cadential 6/4. 3, 2, 1 in one voice. And there we go. So cadential is the 1, 6, 4 going to 5, going to 1. This happens at cadences. And actually, this is kind of important to talk about. I didn't mention this before. Pedal 6/4 and passing 6/4 are always on weak beats. Okay, so they sound like this: pedal 6/4, and then passing 6/4. Okay, that middle chord, that 6/4 chord, is on a weak beat, but the cadential 6/4 is always on a strong beat, and the weak beat is the resolution to the 5 chord. Okay, and this can also be a 5/7 if I put that there. Okay, so these 3 6/4 chords are ones that you might have to write on the part writing or FRQ7. The last one is the let's see, how do I do this? Okay. The last one is the arpeggiated 6/4. And that's basically where it's just one big chord, the same chord, but the bass jumps to the 5th of the chord. Okay, so this one, arpeggiated, this one might be in a multiple choice question. It's not going to be something you're going to have to part write. It doesn't come up in part writing questions. Is what a plagal cadence. This technically could be some type of plagal cadence. It does occasionally happen. Normally a plagal cadence is a root position 4, but you do sometimes have the bass just staying on the scale degree 1 the whole time, and with a pedal 6/4. I feel like that's not going to come up on the AP test, but technically it could. Voice exchange, yes, okay. What else? If there's an accidental in the figured bass, it is always the leading tone. So whatever key you're in, if there's an accidental, you're in a minor key and you're raising the leading tone. If you're in almost any key, it's a sharp. If you're in C minor or F minor, which have 3 flats and 4 flats, scale degree 7 has a flat on it. So in order to raise it, you have to add a natural. Okay, so any accidental, any sharp, any slash, any plus sign in the figured bass just means you are adding one leading tone to one of the voices. That's it. Z figure bass, 1, 6, 4, 6, and then consecutive leaps. Oh, consecutive leaps. Consecutive leaps in the same direction. This is more of like a counterpoint rule that isn't going to come up in part writing. You can't have 2 leaps in the same direction unless they outline a triad, which, as long as you're using a third and a third, or a third and a fourth, or a fourth and a third, it will outline a triad. So consecutive leaps in the same direction that are wrong is like when you go like a fifth and then a third, or like a fifth and a fifth, or a fourth and a fourth. Okay, those are consecutive leaps in the same direction that would be wrong, but I don't think there's a point taken off specifically for that, but if you do that, you're probably going to make other mistakes. There is always a 5 of 5. Oh, a 7 diminished 7. Oh, let's talk about 7 diminished 7. I love 7 diminished 7, but that sounds scary, doesn't it? Okay, let's talk about 7 diminished 7. I'm sorry, not just 7 diminished 7. 7 7 of 5. 7 7 of 5. Let's talk about that. Okay, so real quick, I do have a video on the 7/7 of 5 chord. I think it's episode 35 of the chord by chord series. You can watch it if you want. Okay, so think about this. I'm in C minor. I'm in C minor. Okay, and I'm going to a 5 chord. Okay, I'm going to a 5 chord. Okay. A 7/7 of 5 would be if I put a 7/7 chord in this key of G. Okay, so in the key of G, a 7/7 chord be F sharp, A natural, C, E flat. There we go. Okay, so this is in C minor. This is 1, 7, 7 of, nope, of 5, 5. Okay, so let's listen to this. Okay, so that's 7/7 of 5. This is a big scary chord. This could be on the test, but in the past 25 years, it has been on one test, and it was in a harmonic dictation in a minor key. So I don't think it's going to happen. And if it does, it's going to, make everybody unhappy. But this is what a 7/7 of 5 looks like. It's almost always in root position. And it's sort of like a 5/6/5 of 5. A 5/6/5 would be a D7 over F sharp. So all that would be different here is that note would change. This would be a 5/6/5 of 5. Okay, so the thing about the 7/7 of 5 is, look at this. We're in C minor, and you have 1 and 3 coming straight from this one chord, right? You have 1, 1, 3, 3 in the soprano, and then the bass is on the sharp 4, and it resolves to 5, and the tenor is on the A going down to G. That's scale degree 6. Okay, so a 7/7 of 5 is always sharp 4, raised scale degree 6 in a minor key, or regular scale degree 6 in a major key, 1 and 3. And yeah, that's what it does. It sounds really cool. I don't think it's going to be on the test. I wouldn't freak out about it. In a major key, look at this. This is a weird thing. In a major key, E to A, D to G, these are parallel fifths. And so in a major key, this is going to go to a 1/6/4 chord before it goes to a 5 chord. Okay, so listen to this. Okay, so that is 7/7, and now it's half diminished instead of being fully diminished. There we go. 7 half diminished 7, but it's the same thing. F sharp, A, C, and now we have E instead of E flat. Okay. If this is news to you, if you didn't know that 7/7 of 5 could be on the test, don't worry about it. Like I said, I only know of it happening once in the past 25 years. But in a minor key, you might see it like this. These uneven fifths are okay. Unequal fifths are okay because they don't involve the bass voice and they're going down instead of up. But in a major key, it's usually like that. And if you have ever heard a classical concerto, I call this the concerto chord. Every concerto right before the cadenza, they usually put a 7/7 of 5, and then they stop on the cadential 6/4, and then the soloist plays their cadenza, and then the orchestra comes in on the 5 chord, and then it finishes out. So I do have a whole video about this. It's probably not worth watching right now before the test, but if you want to, you can do that. Okay. All right. Tritone substitution is not on the test. Tritone substitution is an advanced topic. And if your AP theory teacher also teaches jazz, they probably love tritone substitution, but it's not on the AP test. Yeah. Should we talk about the Phrygian half cadence? Would that make anybody happy? Phrygian half cadence. Let's talk about the Phrygian half cadence real quick. Phrygian half cadence is in a minor key, and I love Phrygian half cadences. You should watch my video on it if you haven't. It's when we go from a 4/6 to a 5 in a minor key. And here's what you need to remember about this. All of these chords have specific things that they came from. And the thing that this one came from is the bass going scale degree 6 to 5, or in C minor, 6 to 5, and the soprano going 4 to 5. And this is the thing that students sometimes never really learn or understand, is that the soprano specifically should be the voice going from 4 to 5 here. So this is a C minor chord, an F minor over A flat to a G chord. Okay, and let's use a starting voicing of this. Okay, so in a Phrygian half cadence, you have to have those two voices do that. Phrygian half cadence is it is likely on the test. It is on many tests. It's not necessarily going to be there, but it very well could be in the harmonic dictation or the part writing. Okay. In a Phrygian half cadence, one voice, either the alto or the tenor, has to go from 1 to 7. So let's put in the tenor. Okay, because the only voice that can reach scale degree 7 has to come from 1. Because if we came from F, if we came from 4, it would leap a tritone. And if you came from A flat, if the tenor was this, that's an augmented second. So literally the only voice that can reach, the only scale degree that can reach 7 is 1. You have no choice. You have to have one voice going 1 to 7. And then the remaining voice, usually the alto, we don't have a scale degree 2 yet. So the only way to get to scale degree 2 is either from 1, in which case we're doubling the 1 with the tenor, or from 4 with the alto and the soprano on the same note. You can have both of these guys on the same note. But in this specific 3-chord progression, that would create voice overlap. So this is a Phrygian half cadence. Okay, soprano going 4/5, bass going 6/5, one voice, usually the tenor, going 1/7, but sometimes it's the alto, and then the other voice going either 1/2 or 4/2. And my video on the Phrygian half cadence explains this in detail. So if this is news to you, you can brush up on that tomorrow morning, maybe. It's not a long video. Okay. All right, guys, this is going on a lot longer than I thought. Any last questions? Yeah, FRQ7, just pair. Okay, so if you have 4 to 3 in the soprano, pair it with 1 to 7 in the bass. Or if you have 1 to 7 in the soprano, pair it with 4 to 3 in the bass. And the resulting chords when you do that are 5, 6, 5 to 1, or 5, 4, 2 to 1, 6. Is the accidental in FRQ7 always 5 of 5? Yes, it is always 5 of 5. That didn't used to be true like 25 years ago, but ever since then, it's always 5 of 5. FRQ7 has never been in a compound meter, and it has never been in a minor key since 2004. 2004 was in a minor key, and they never did it again. Yeah, FRQ7 is always in 4/4 in a major key. All right, guys, it's 10:30. You guys need to go to sleep if you're on the East Coast. And thanks for joining me. If you have any other questions, put comments on some of my other videos. Check out my shorts for some multiple choice questions. And thank you so much for joining me and watching my videos. And good luck on the test. If you are here, you're gonna do well. I believe in you. So thanks again, and good luck. If you're not taking the test until 10 days from now for the makeup exam, good for you. You have a lot more time to practice. Yeah, music theory is awesome. I'm glad you guys took this test. I love music theory, and I hope that it has been beneficial to you. So thanks again, and good luck on the exam, and I'll see you around. Good night.